The June 12, 2019 Prosper Portland Board of Commissioners meeting is now convened. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Platt?
Here.
Commissioner Gambetti?
Here.
Commissioner Moreland Capuya?
Here.
Commissioner Myers?
Here.
Chair Cruz?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so first up, Commissioner reports. Commissioner Platt?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Commissioner Gambetti?
Yep, on June 1st, I attended My People's Market at the post office site, which had a great turnout and energy. I thought that was a really fun event. And on June 4th, I caught the very tail end of the Broadway Corridor Open House event at the Eco Trust.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Myers?
May 11th, I attended the St. John's Parade and Festival. June 5th, Metro's Urban Innovator Award event. And then June 11th, Broadway Corridors Executive Committee, which was yesterday, and the Coalition of Communities of Color Summer Soiree.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Moreland Capuya?
As we laugh, I have 4 things to report today. Okay, so May 13th, I participated in Celebrate Trade with the Oregon Consular Corps. And May 24th, I participated in the Neil Kelly Scholarship Banquet that was hosted by the Albina Rotary. And June 5th, the Hill Block meeting, and June 8th, the Rose Festival Grand Floral Parade with actually Sheila Holden, who was the Grand Marshal at that time.
Great, thank you. All right, and for my part, on May 11th, I attended the St. John's Parade with Commissioner Myers. Also on May 11th, I attended the Portland Center Stage Gala. On May 13th, I attended the Celebrate Trade event with Commissioner Moreland Capuya and Executive Director Branham and others. On May 16th, I attended a meeting of the Mayor's Council of Economic Advisors. And on May 22nd, I attended the Portland Center Stage Board meeting. All right, so next up, Executive Director report. Executive Director Branham.
Good afternoon, Chair Cruz and Commissioners. It's been a full month since we had our last board meeting. I also attended the Celebrate Trade event on May 13th, which was a great celebration of our traded sector companies and a scholarship opportunity for local students looking to go abroad and learn abroad. Commissioner Moreland Capuya is being very humble. She was the MC and moved things along, and it was great to have her leadership there. On May 14th, we welcomed Genentech's Access Solutions team here, along with 300 new quality jobs to the city of Portland. Headquartered in San Francisco, the Access Solutions specialists help access life-saving medicines, and it was really heartening to hear from one cancer patient survivor who had really relied on their services in order to recover. They've already become key community partners supporting Transitions Project and OMSI, and so I want to appreciate Greater Portland Inc. and Business Oregon Work Systems and Prosper Portland's Jared Weiner for helping them find a location and really thrive here in Portland. We're delighted to have them. Also, another major milestone, City Council, as our budget committee, voted to approve our budget on May 23rd. It was a tough budget year for the city, lots of important decisions, and I want to appreciate Mayor Wheeler and City Council for supporting our ability to help local entrepreneurs and to increase access to employment opportunities. So in particular, I want to appreciate those Prosper Portland staff who made it possible for us to put together the budget and make our priorities clear. So thanks to Tony Barnes and Courtney Cohn, Francis Thurman, Justin Douglas, and Lisa Norwood. And we'll have an opportunity to hear more about the budget shortly. As was mentioned, we had an outstanding My People's Market, the 4th event that took place on Friday, May 31st and Saturday, June 1st at the post office site in Northwest Portland. There were approximately 450 people who participated at the trade show on Friday, which provided opportunities for business-to-business engagement, for businesses like New Seasons to meet and increase procurement and collaboration with local entrepreneurs of color. There were about 80 businesses that participated in the trade show and about 120, I think, who participated in the open market on Saturday, June 5th, where we anticipate there were at least 7,500 people who came between noon and 7 p.m., which is an incredible turnout in any event, but given all of the other things that were happening on that day, it was really an exceptional turnout. So I want to acknowledge Prosper Portland's Tori Campbell, Amanda Park, Lisa Norwood, June Reyes, Ann Mangan, Yvonne Smoker, Nelu Cabrera, Ember Breckenridge, and all of the staffers who came and volunteered and helped direct people, took pictures, and just generally participated. From the partner side, I want to appreciate the talented team at Travel Portland, our sponsors, New Seasons Market, the PSU School of Business, the Port of Portland, TriMet, the Portland Mercury, YGB Art and Entertainment, and the stage hosts Village Vibe. So just a great event, and it's been wonderful to see it evolve and grow over time. As was mentioned, we held an open house on Tuesday, June 4th at the EcoTrust building as a follow-up to the board's endorsement of the play concept for Broadway Corridor. The open house is part of our ongoing work over the next few months to further refine the concept based on the feedback that we've heard. There are additional opportunities to participate, including an online open house that's available now through Friday, June 21st. You can go to BroadwayCorridorPDX.com to share your opinion on the preferred development concept. And while she isn't here, I do want to acknowledge June Reyes. It's her last day at Prosper Portland, and it is not and she really was responsible for the community engagement and the stakeholder the steering committee work that we did. And it's not hyperbole to say that I think she raised the bar for community engagement permanently for Prosper Portland. Her contributions were truly incredible. And so we will miss her greatly, but we wish her all the best in the future. And we know that we will be seeing her doing great things and really being an advocate for and showing us how to listen to community. As a reminder, Prosper Portland has issued requests for proposals for 2 key sites in the Old Town Chinatown neighborhood, the quarter block on Northwest 4th and Burnside, adjacent to the Chinatown Gate and Block 25. The properties are being offered for purchase and redevelopment to address Old Town Chinatown Action Plan and community development goals. RFP responses are due back to Prosper Portland by 5 p.m. on Friday, June 14th, and you can find out more information at prosperportland.us/OTCT. So just a couple things to mention going forward. On Thursday, June 13th, Commissioner Platt will join City Commissioner Chloe U. Daly and PBOT staff for the dedication of the Foster Streetscape project. Prosper Portland contributed $1.5 million from the Lintz Town Center TIF district for the $9 million project and worked actively to support businesses along the corridor who might be adversely impacted by the construction. The dedication will be held at the Portland Mercado at 10 a.m., so if you're close by, come check it out. On Thursday, June 20th, Rose CDC and the Lentz community will celebrate Made for You and Me, a fundraising event at the Asian Health and Service Center, celebrating the opening of the Woody Guthrie Place Apartments. Woody Guthrie Place Apartments in Lentz Town Center is Rose's first mixed income property. Prosper Portland provided funding to the project along with many other partners, and Chair Cruz will be speaking at the event and representing us. We're really excited to see this 4th project of the first phase open, residents who have incomes ranging from 30% to 100% of median family income who are interested. I think there are some 3-bedroom units as well as 2 and 1-bedroom units. Definitely should reach out to Rose CDC. In honor of Juneteenth next Wednesday, I invite everyone to visit the website of Isaka Shamsuddin, a local artist, educator, and activist. His murals can be found all over Portland, including on the side of the Microenterprise Services of Oregon building on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Isaka is a client of Prosper Portland's Inclusive Business Resource Network, and he's been working on his Legacy Project, which is a 19-month Juneteenth calendar for many years, and it's now complete. So you can go to IsakaShamsuddin.com for more information. We will list a link on our website as well if you're looking for an opportunity to have a beautiful calendar and celebrate Juneteenth. And finally, just two last things. I encourage everyone to attend the 27th Annual Good in the Hood Multicultural Music, Arts, and Food Festival. You can go to goodinthehood.org for more information. And also want to invite everyone to attend the 6th Annual Taste of Park Rose event on Saturday, June 22nd. You can go to historicparkrose.com for more information and look for the Prosper Portland banner, because at these events you'll see us, and we're going to be engaging with local community members to talk about our programs and hear a little bit about their priorities. So thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, lots of exciting things going on, as always. Next up, we have meeting minutes for the meeting on May 8th. Did everybody get a chance to look at those? And would someone like to make a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, minutes pass unanimously. All right, next up, we have public comment for items not on the agenda. And I understand that Ashley Henry from Business for a Better Portland is here to speak. And you're actually speaking with respect to an item later on the agenda.
I am, and I apologize, we had a mix-up about the
No problem. Thank you
time.
for coming.
I'm not able to stay until the actual agenda item, so I apologize for the mix-up.
Great.
Appreciate the opportunity to make a few remarks in regards to the agenda item around your investment in Greater Portland, Inc. We, as an organization, have really loved working with the Prosper Portland staff, and since the last time I presented to you here, I would say that we've only deepened our partnership with your team in terms of our engagement with Portland Maine's progress and really digging into the details of that program and ensuring that it's successful and it meets the goals that it's intended to meet. And a lot of that has also given us just a chance to see how economic development more broadly is working, not only in the city, but in the region. And one of the opportunities that I had recently with many other Portland leaders was to travel to the Bay Area to learn, the best practices trips that are hosted by Greater Portland, Inc. And I think it was a real aha moment for a lot of Portlanders who were on that trip. Seeing some of the unintended consequences of economic development strategies that were very well intended, but not necessarily holistic in their approach, and have resulted in profound suffering on the streets, 90-minute commutes, super commutes they called them, and it was actually really fascinating because when we go on these best practices trips, we're often meeting with business leaders, government leaders, nonprofit leaders, and sometimes the messages are really different. And what was fascinating was that all the slideshows that we got, the PowerPoints, the slides were pretty much all the same. They should, wow, look at this incredible economic growth. Look at all this job creation. Look at all these this GDP growth. And then the next slide or the few slides later would always, and here are these challenges that we're facing as a region, primarily around housing and transportation. And I was on a phone call this morning with some delegates from that trip, and we're talking about working on an op-ed together, and someone referred to it as sort of a Mad Max scenario of what we were witnessing on the streets. And because that was such a visceral experience for so many of us, I think it gave us an opportunity to think differently about how economic development is conducted. And so when I returned, I took the opportunity to speak with Wally Van Valkenburg, who's the outgoing chair. And while our organization of GPI, while our organization has not been able to afford to be at that table, definitely see the incredible work that they have done as an organization in coordinating the public and private sector economic development. And yet at the same time wonder if we are running the risk of perhaps making some of the same mistakes that the Bay Area wishes that it could undo. And so when I saw, so it's prompted a lot of conversation. I don't want you to get the impression this is the first time I'm bringing it up. It's been actually probably my favorite topic since for the last 2 months, is how can we rethink what we're doing in Portland, not just with this agency, but much more broadly. How can we learn from those lessons in the Bay Area? And so when I saw on your agenda that you were going to be discussing the grant, I just wanted to raise that as an opportunity for conversation. I certainly absolutely support your ongoing support of GPI, but given that they are in a transition right now with leadership and thinking through what's next for that organization, it seems like a really appropriate time for stepping back a little bit. And I know some of those conversations are already underway, and because we're not at that table, we're not actively a part of it. But another thing to point out is the folks who are at that table comprise a particular economic worldview just based on where they sit in the region's economy. And so that would naturally influence the way they perceive what it means to do economic development well. And given the cost of being involved in the organization, it of course, predetermines who's going to be able to be at that table, which then affects the outcomes, or even just affects the strategies that the organization chooses to deploy. So I'm hopeful that this is a time that our organization will be able to approach GPI and explore. We had started those conversations with Janet before she left, and once I found out that she was leaving, those conversations ended, but I'm looking forward to resuming them, and I just wanted, since you're utilizing city resources to support that organization, thought this might be a good time to raise that as an opportunity.
Questions?
Yeah, I'm curious about what insights you might share with us with respect to the role, the gap, I guess you could say, that exists within the economic development partners involved in putting together these longer-term plans, including Greater Portland, Inc., and whether it's Greater Portland or some other entity that would be best positioned to address the concerns that you're raising. My understanding of GPI is they're very much focused on recruitment. That's what they do.
Exactly.
Right? So I'm wondering whether it would be more efficient to designate another group to fill in the gap and to let GPI kind of do what it does, right? And what it's staffed to do and funded to do.
Yeah, I don't have the complete answer to your question. We saw that it's the outcome of that growth and development is something that has to be considered. And I know that there were some leaders within GPI that started the Greater Portland 2020 initiative that was intended to look at issues of equity and diversity, and that seems to have stalled out a little bit. The co-chair of that has not been as engaged lately, and so I'm curious about, like, is there an opportunity there? Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Do you see a role, what I'm most curious, do you see a role for Prosper in this
Yeah,
respect?
well, when you think of,
and inform that.
thank you. Yeah, when you look at the great work that you have been doing around promoting entrepreneurship and communities of color and working with those who have been left out of the economic boom, I think about the disconnect, like how much of the conversation about entrepreneurship is actually happening at the GPI table, and where what are the economic realities of our city? Where is the job growth actually coming from? And where are the opportunities to create the prosperity? I mean, Prosper Portland has already demonstrated you have a very strong take on what that should be. And I don't necessarily see that connecting as much with a recruitment strategy, for example. So I don't have completely formulated positions. I just think it's a really ripe conversation. Yeah, thanks.
I just want to say thanks for taking the time to come and share your perspectives. I think you offer great insights, and I'm really interested in some of these best practice explorations that you've been doing. Is there any more details coming out of that? Like, I mean, I think it would just be really interesting to find out more specifics, I think, in terms of
Several of us, I would say like 35 of the 80 who were on the trip, attended a wrap-up last week and talked about how to potentially do work together collaboratively after the trip to not only share some of the learnings, but also act upon some of the policy initiatives, for example, that we saw that were under consideration in California. How could we follow suit? And so this group that met this morning around homelessness and looking at an op-ed, that was just the very, very first step. I think one of the shortcomings, unfortunately, of this particular trip as it's configured is that the budget isn't really there to build in the staffing. To facilitate the ongoing learning and or maybe bringing some of the lessons learned back to others who weren't on the trip. Someone told us at the wrap-up event that the Greater Denver Chamber of Commerce hosts their best practices trips. They have a $100,000 budget for staffing and support of those trips, because I'm sure as well as anybody that you go on these trips, you have this great learning, you have every intention in the world of coming back and sharing that, but in the absence of someone herding all the cats who were on that trip and getting those lessons out, it's just not going to happen because we're all really, really busy with our day jobs. And so there's, I think, a gap that exists that could be addressed in the future with perhaps a different approach to how the trips are funded and staffed would be something to consider for future trips. And that was something that we talked about at the wrap-up last week was could we rethink this in terms of the trip fees and how some of that could go to subsidize the learning after the trip, because it's not all about going on the trip, it's what we do afterwards when we come back.
Just to follow up on Commissioner Platt's comment about GPI and its role in recruitment, I wondered, is there a similar organization in San Francisco that does similar sort of outreach for recruitment in San Francisco that you guys were able to interact with when you were down there? And maybe not today, but maybe in a subsequent, exchange, I'd love to know sort of what the perception was of that organization, and were there specific things that you saw that they were doing that maybe failed or could have been done better, or, you know what I mean? Maybe there's some direct lessons we could learn, so.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, thank you for coming. Okay, all right. Next up, we have a consent agenda item, authorizing short-term interfund operating loans not to exceed $1 million from specified funds to the Community Development Block Grant Economic Opportunity Initiative Fund and Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative Urban Renewal Area Funds from July 1, 2019 to June 30, 2020. Does anyone have any desire for discussion of that, or can we go ahead and vote? All right. No comments then? Would someone like to make a motion to approve resolution number 7313?
So moved?
Thank you. You have a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Next, we will do the next hearing. The Prosper Portland Board of Commissioners will now recess in order to convene the Tax Supervising Conservation Commission public hearing on the Prosper Portland fiscal year 2019 to 2020 approved budget. Okay.
Yeah.
I wondered if maybe I didn't phrase that very well. Yeah, right. Okay, whatever. Maybe I said something wrong. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I call to order the annual Prosper Portland budget hearing. My name is James Offsink, Vice Chair of the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, and I welcome you and members of the public to the hearing. I will now ask my fellow commissioners and the TSCC staff to introduce themselves, including if they have a business relationship with the district that could be perceived as a conflict of interest. Let's start with Brendan.
Hello, my name is Brendan Watkins, Commissioner with the TSCC, going on my 8th year. And in my other life, I'm a banker with Piper Jaffray, and we do not have a relationship with the district.
Hello, my name is Mark Wobold, and I work for the president of Portland State University as a senior policy analyst, and I don't have a conflict, and this is my 3rd year with the TSCC.
Good afternoon. I'm Margot Norton. This is my 4th year on the commission. I'm retired, but my professional career was in government finance. I've worked for cities, counties, the state of Oregon, and for Metro, the regional government, where I retired as their CFO.
And I'm Craig Gibbons, staff.
Penny Betchart, staff.
Thank you. We're conducting this hearing as a service to the district and the public. The purpose of the hearing is to promote public discussion of the budget. The Commission wants this discussion to be thoughtful consideration around current and future budget issues. The Commission is responsible for evaluating the extent to which the Prosper Portland's budget process conformed to state law, and at the conclusion of the meeting, we will certify that the district's process did meet state requirements. The district will make the first presentation this afternoon, and the commission will then ask several questions and discuss the budget with you. Following this discussion, we'll take testimony from the public. There's a sign-in sheet someplace. Oh, right here at the front, if any members of the public would like to testify. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chair Cruz.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Offsink. As in prior years, the development of the budget has been truly a collaborative effort that includes significant staff time, a budget work session, and coordination with our 20-member Budget Advisory Committee. The committee, whose members represent a diverse array of stakeholders, met 4 times over the course of the budget cycle and provided invaluable input. Staff also reviewed specific tax increment finance budgets with approximately 10 community, business, and neighborhood organizations to receive input on budget allocations, supporting projects and programs, supporting community action plans. Over the last month, our budget was presented to City Council for approval, and through that process, the budget you received reflects additional city resources being added to programs that directly impact building an equitable economy, such as the Inclusive Business Resource Network. I am proud of the agency's work moving forward the priorities established in the budget, and we look forward to seeing the impact of our work by the implementation of the programs and projects in the coming fiscal year. With that, back to you, Vice Chair Offsink.
Thank you very much. So we'll jump right into our questions then, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to have some back and forth through these. So we know that Prosper Portland is entering the 3rd year of the 10-year financial stability plan. We're interested in what in this budget we see that is raising in importance and what is lowering in importance with respect to the district's future financial stability. So if you could give us some examples of what is becoming more important and what's becoming less important as we move through the plan.
Okay. Forgive me, I'm going to read this from my written remarks here. The financial sustainability plan's objectives are listed in sequential order, with optimizing existing resources as a major priority for the first 5 years of the plan. To ensure that we will manage well our existing portfolio of assets, over the last year, staff implemented a new Yardi property management software to more effectively manage and plan property performance, and will be bringing individual property plans to the board in July. We're also looking carefully at how several key projects being completed or being implemented, such as the Broadway corridor, Phase 2 of the Lintz Town Center project, the Convention Center Hotel Garage, and strategic sites in the Central East Side can deliver on return expectations that are outlined in our financial sustainability plan. Staff will also be bringing 3 new loan tools with the goal of increasing our lending volume and better meeting both our mission and our financial sustainability plan goals to the board over the summer. We've also focused attention on some of the priorities that will become increasingly important in the next few years, securing new public resources and financial tools. We have been successful in securing additional general fund resources to intensify our citywide economic development work, focusing on the Inclusive Business Resource Network and the Neighborhood Prosperity Network. Looking forward, we will continue to look at expanding other public resources, including the return of taxes from the defeasance of TIF districts and how those resources can support our mission. Finally, Prosper Portland applied for a 2018 round of new market tax credits. However, we were informed last month that Prosper Portland did not receive an allocation. We will continue to evaluate whether to submit applications in the future.
So, and you know, if there are experts in the room also who want to weigh in, I heard several things in the response about things that are becoming more important or maybe continuing the same level of importance that we've seen in past budgets. And I'm wondering if there are anything that is becoming kind of less important that we're seeing kind of sunset or drop off, and maybe I just missed it in the response.
Do you have anything that
Yeah. So the financial sustainability plan was envisioned as a framework.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's not quite a philosophical orientation, but it is a framework. So the framework says we should optimize our existing resources, we should look for new resources, and we should leverage our leverage our talents to find new partnerships. So I'm not sure that within either of those anything has become more or less important. I think we are adhering to that framework. I think we are learning as we move forward about what it's going to take to implement those. And so the projects that Chair Cruz mentioned are really within the first 5 years, those projects that we anticipate having the most significant financial return from. And what you'll see in the budget is there are also a lot of community expectations, strategic priorities, and things like holding costs and market variations, which are potentially impacting our ability to meet those financial objectives. So it hasn't become any less important. We are still striving to meet our financial sustainability plan goals, and we're learning as we implement. So I think that's, I guess I can't, there's nothing.
It's more of a tool set is what I'm hearing. And
yeah, I think it's more of a tool
yeah.
set and a technique, like how are we going to tactically move forward? It's not so much a strategic prioritization. It's we're learning and we're improving as we go forward. I would say that when we put out the 50% plan, so that was a number of years ago now, 2016, I'm looking at it's been a while, there was a focus on district parking as a vehicle for revenue, and that was kind of that was cited as a particular asset class that was an opportunity, and I would say that that has become less of a focus, and that isn't since the adoption of the financial sustainability plan, because the financial sustainability plan was kind of vehicle agnostic. It just said we need to get to a 6% return, but we didn't call out district parking solutions, and so from the public's perspective, it might be worthwhile to note that that is no longer such a heavy focus of the investment portfolio.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I have the next question. So the post office property is, I would say, the big redevelopment project in Prosper Portland's future. I'm curious about what is included in the upcoming budget for this project. What is the timeline for the redevelopment of the property? And to kind of follow up, Prosper Portland, like a lot of other public institutions in the area, talk about trying to view these, types of projects and investments through the equity lens, and I'm curious how you guys are using your equity lens in your view of this project.
I get to answer this one. So the project includes a total of $8.2 million budgeted for next year. $1.9 million is for property management costs, including 24-hour security of the entire site, and utilities and other management costs related to the post office building. $6.3 million is budgeted to begin site prep costs, including relocation of the post office retail functions to a new location within the River District, URA. The relocation of the post office retail function is required under the purchase and sale agreement entered into with USPS and is needed prior to the demolish of the USPS building in preparation for future development. Demolition is tentatively anticipated to begin early 2021, allowing.
Fiscal or calendar 21?
Should be calendar.
I'm just curious, we should expect to see it in next budget.
I think we're thinking fiscal year 21, 22. So hopefully calendar year 21, but
Right.
it'll be in the following budget.
Be tentative still, so.
Yeah. We got to move it first.
We have to relocate them first. But it allows for the redevelopment to hopefully begin in mid-2022. Prosper Portland's strategic plan and equity lens have been central to the development of the Broadway Corridor Master Plan and the preferred concept play that was determined earlier this spring. The project steering committee has informed community benefit priorities in addition to the refinement of the preferred concept. This prioritization will inform Prosper's negotiations of the community benefit agreement with a focus on racial and economic equity. In addition, Prosper Portland's business and workforce equity policy guides the agency's contracting for property management, security, and demolition-related contract services.
Can I follow up on that? Because I think we both had a similar gasp when you said 1.2 million for security. Was that right? for a year?
1.9 million is the property management costs.
Okay, property management, all in,
includes-
security, all in. Okay, thank you.
24-hour security
Gotcha.
and the utilities for the whole site.
Okay, thank you.
We were holding our hearing with the City of Portland yesterday morning, and here we are today. And in both cases, we noticed in your budget message and also when we talked with the city, emphasis and funding for the Inclusive Business Resource Network and the activities. So we'd like to know about your activities and how you will determine that they're making a difference.
That's a great question. The basics for the program: annual funding provides technical assistance to over 600 clients, and of those, currently 65% are owned by women and 75% are owned by people of color. So in terms of the focus of the program, it's very much achieving its aims there. These entrepreneurs receive long-term support, which does include over 30 hours of advising each year. And the network programs focus on supporting a business from startup through growth, and ensuring technical assistance does in fact lead to wealth creation. That is the objective. I would further add that if you are planning to stay longer, we will soon be briefed by Kay Little, who is the interim capital improvement consultant, I think I got his title correct, who has been very thoughtfully reviewing the structure of our small business loan programs to ensure that they best meet the needs of our clients. I'd further add that we are also deep into the process for hiring a new economic development director, and that their role will include continuing to refine our metrics for success.
So it sounds as if one of your metrics is of the advising group of clients or the advisees, their growth and success. So how's it going?
I would say at this point it's going well in terms of the early returns and the early success metrics. I'd say it's also too soon to tell because this is a rather new initiative. From my perspective as a commissioner, I've been very impressed with the efforts and the success that Prosper has had in creating that network of service providers. I think there was a real need prior to that for some kind of convenient authority, right? And gathering the groups together and making sure that we avoid redundancies, we make sure to play to each one's strengths, coordinating efforts so that they can focus their assistance on the clients in a way there where everybody gets a little bit of help. I think that's been extremely effective. I think it's a good model. I would say, again, in terms of participation and community response, the My People's Market has been incredibly successful. We continue to see growth in both participation from network providers, our clients, and of course, the public. And so I think that's a huge success and credit to the team in that respect. But I think, again, I would look specifically to the new Economic Development Director to really chart the course for how will we be measuring that wealth creation in the future, whether it's a 2-year goal, 5-year goal, 10-year goal. We'd want to really understand, are we spending our money and our resources in the right way, and are we getting those results?
And are you expecting one of those metrics to include job creation of the type that's identified in your equity plan, the type of job and the type of wage job?
Absolutely. That is embedded in the structure of the program, and I'm sure.
Maybe I'll weigh in just to add on to what Commissioner Platt mentioned. So, when we put together the Inclusive Business Resource Network, we were putting together what had before been thought of as 3 different programs. So there was the micro enterprise program, our small business program, and then what we called our entrepreneurship program, which were our high growth kind of think tech startup sorts of businesses. We put them all together in a continuum and had all of the programs focus on supporting entrepreneurs of color and particularly within technology, female entrepreneurs. Together, those 16 providers came up with 4 sets of what they call badges, because historically we'd reported on things like increased wages or in access to capital, but trying to find common growth metrics amongst somebody who's a food cart and somebody who's trying to get their beta on the street, it's a pretty different series. So we've come up with 4 different badges, which we are piloting for the next 5 years that were co-created. And the badges basically have 9 different elements. And so the badges include being strong and stable. So that's having an established foundation and a future. And it's basically like you are not a business in crisis. So the goal over the 5 years is that there will be 1,000 businesses that identify as strong and stable. After the first year, we are at...
Sorry, to clarify,
Please.
sorry, you said there are 600 businesses currently?
600 businesses annually are served, and it's actually been more like 750, but at least 600 businesses are served a year.
Cool. And so it's kind of a growth goal, right? That 1,000 would be, have the
1,000
strong
over
and
the
stable.
5-year period.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that we
Okay.
would, through that, acknowledging that for a number of these businesses, having long-term relationships is really valuable. And so we anticipate that there will kind of be a hockey stick of outcomes, so that the first year it's going to feel modest in terms of outcomes, and the second year we'll really build on that, and by year 5 we hope to see pretty transformative outcomes. So we will hope to get to 1,000 strong and stable businesses. We hope to get to 250 businesses that have the growth badge. So those are businesses that have realized efficiencies in ordering, operations, or production in terms of really having grown in a measurable way. We hope to see 25 businesses that have scaled. So this means that they would have a market-proven product or service and are really thinking about how they expand their footprint. So a business that had 1 retail presence now is looking to have 3 or is entering into an international or national market. And then 100 that will have launched, so that means moving past the concept and really getting into a new market. So we are measuring each of those. We have data for the first year, and I think what we know is that we are learning as we go, and that work that Commissioner Platt mentioned in terms of coming up with this networked approach and really forming a community is going to strengthen the ability of those providers to help meet these targets.
So, so the badge idea intrigues me. So I'm a business, I've been successful in all 4 of these areas. I have 4 badges. Is this now become a marketing opportunity for me? Does this provide me with some sort of leverage in getting additional resources at the city level, or?
It's an interesting question. I don't think we have considered it as a marketing opportunity as much as it is one of the ways that we ensure that the technical assistance providers are supporting their businesses in ways that lead to outcomes that really matter. And so it's a way that, basically suggests, we know that you've worked with each of these businesses for 30, 60, 90 hours, or sometimes more in a year. What's the outcome of that? And sometimes it's not, from point A to point B, you gave 30 hours of technical assistance and you're going to suddenly hire 10 people. So what are those things that we can measure? Having a accountant review your books and being able to read your books is actually really important. So let's make sure that we acknowledge that and that we are able to measure that. So I think it's more on that end.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would add just one more point to that end. As a small business owner myself, I think that the network effect that the IBRN brings to the table is twofold. There's a network effect of the service providers, right, and being able to sort of tag team the work. And then there's a very valuable network effect in the entrepreneur network, right? And in having colleagues and people you can bounce ideas off and share your war stories, right? That's hugely valuable because as a small business person, you're working all day, you don't have time. It can be lonely at times. And so to have mentors and people who are checking in on you and tracking your progress and holding you accountable as well can be really helpful in structuring your work. And then just having people who, again, are going through the same thing as you are is also really valuable. Psychologically, I think very valuable.
Last year, we talked to you about the Affordable Commercial Bonus Program. Has that program been put in place yet, and are there any results that you can share with us?
Sure. The Affordable Commercial Mixed Use Floor Area Bonus was adopted by the Portland City Council into Portland City Code under 33.130.212 floor area and height bonus options. The Affordable Commercial Space Bonus option allows for proposals that provide on-site affordable commercial space or pay into an affordable commercial space fund that may then increase the project's maximum height and FAR if on-site affordable commercial space is provided and/or additional rights purchased through a contribution to an affordable commercial space fund. Without promotion or marketing of the bonus option, Prosper Portland has received 2 inquiries since the code adoption and 1 application from the development community to use the new bonus. As the agency develops as an affordable commercial program offering to the development and business communities, the agency anticipates undertaking more active promotion and marketing of the bonus option. To date, Prosper Portland's affordable commercial focus has been launching 4 affordable commercial pilot projects, each in various stages of development. There's the Alberta Commons. As a part of the Community Benefits Agreement, Prosper Portland entered into leases and provided tenant improvements and business support to 3 tenants in alignment with the CBA and the North by Northeast Community Development Initiative. In summer 2019, all 3 tenants, Cason's Fine Meats, Champions Barber Shop, and Greenhouse Gallery and Boutique, will have opened in their space, and that is a pretty proud accomplishment. 10th and Yamhill, Prosper Portland has entered into a master lease with the Portland Bureau of Transportation to tenant the ground floor of the 10th and Yamhill Smart Park Garage. The goal of this project is to provide beautiful, affordable retail space to local businesses that align with the agency's strategic plan. The ground floor is demised into 12 standalone retail spaces ranging from 690 square feet to 2,600 square feet and includes a restaurant space and market space for small vendors, providing options for a range of businesses at different stages of development. It will be delivered in a warm shell condition that will enable tenants to make minimal improvements to the space and focus on their core businesses. The project is on schedule to be completed in the fall of 2019. Then there's Lintz Commons. The Lintz Commons mixed-use project, completed in 2018, has available approximately 7,500 square feet of retail space available, with approximately half of that space targeted for affordable commercial tenanting with technical assistance, reduced rent, and tenant improvement grants to support qualified businesses. And then lastly, 106th and Halsey, which is also a mixed-use project anticipated for Northeast 106th and Halsey, is slated to include Prosper Portland-owned ground floor commercial for affordable and community-based commercial tenanting. And construction of this project is anticipated to get underway in fiscal year 2019-20.
So as the developer, by making these investments and making these commercial opportunities available, I get additional FAR. Do I have to use it in that building, or can I use it in another building I'm working on?
I will defer
Yeah,
to
so,
Kimberly on that.
So if you're going to, so there's two options. So you can either pay a fee in lieu, or if you're going to build it and not pay the fee, then it needs to be used on-site in the building that's receiving the additional FAR.
Okay, thank you. I also, did you guys have more questions? Okay, I have the next one as well. So you also mentioned 2 East Side, one of which you've already talked about, which is the 106th and Halsey, so I'll skip that one. And as well as the 102nd and Pacific. These are 2 East Side projects getting off the ground, mixed use, mixed income projects. What can you report on 102nd and Pacific?
Yeah, and I'm happy to provide a little more detail on the 106th and Halsey, if that's
Thank you. Yeah,
helpful.
terrific.
So as Commissioner Moreland Capuya mentioned, it's located at Northeast 106th and Halsey, right adjacent to the new Gateway Discovery Park. So that project is being executed in partnership with Human Solutions, Girding Eatland Development, the Portland Housing Bureau and Prosper Portland. And it includes the ground floor retail space, which can actually open up, spill out onto the park and help activate that park space. So there's a really good, strong synergy there. It also includes office space and 75 units of mixed income housing. So about 2/3 of the units will be affordable. And in terms of the financial investment, approximately $9.5 million in Gateway Urban Renewal Area TIF funds are going to be invested in it, and approximately $6 million invested as a loan to the middle income housing that will be owned by Human Solutions, and approximately $3.5 million invested in the ground floor retail condo. And then you were asking about the 102nd and Pacific project. So over the last couple of years, Prosper Portland has been in discussions with the property owners at 102nd and Pacific, who approached the city with interest in developing their property in conjunction with a adjacent space, property owned by the David Douglas School District. So potential development program would include market rate housing, senior housing, and an education and workforce training program. So Prosper Portland hosted early discussions with David Douglas School District, as well as the Mount Hood Community College and Warner Pacific University. However, over the past year, the owners have sort of slowed on the progress, and we are just continuing to monitor the opportunities with that site.
We had a conversation with Metro about some of their housing options, and they used a term that I was not familiar with, deeply affordable. Do you have any deeply affordable housing units? Are you familiar with that term? Yeah.
Deeply affordable, I imagine, would be 30%
Yeah, I
and
think
below.
deeply
Maybe
affordable,
Kimberly
zero
can
to,
help us.
yeah, I think deeply affordable is generally 0 to 30%.
Right.
Some people talk about permanent supportive housing. We entrust our partners with the Portland Housing Bureau to really deliver the resources to secure deeply affordable housing. They're responsible for investing resources at 0 to 60% median family income, so that includes the deeply affordable units. The partnerships that Commissioner Gambetti just mentioned are really rich in the sense that they partner the Housing Bureau's resources, which include some deeply affordable units, as well as some more middle income units, which is what we're helping to provide resources to support.
Thank you.
So the URA districts, obviously last for a long time, and we're interested in kind of how the emphasis, changes over time and how the projects look different or evolve throughout the life. So we wanted to talk about Lintz specifically and get an update on kind of how the projects have changed over the years, and if the efforts and development in Lintz is kind of on plan for what you had intended.
Yeah, I'll take that one as well. So the Lentz Town Center Urban Renewal Area was established a little over 20 years ago, so 1998. Many projects that were identified in the original URA plan have been completed. That original URA plan goals focused mostly on infrastructure improvements, including street improvements, pedestrian and bike improvements, public facilities, floodwater management. In 2008, the Lentz Town Center URA was amended to add a portion of Foster Road into the district, and additional public involvement was conducted at that time, and a Lentz Town Center 5-year action plan was established. Over the 20 years of the district's history, which has experienced a couple of real estate cycles, which certainly impact progress in different stages, there've been a number of accomplishments. There's been the redevelopment projects at Northeast 92nd Avenue and Foster, so that includes Oliver Station, Lintz Commons, the Asian Health and Service Center, the Woody Guthrie Place, and Assurity Northwest. Really helping to transform the district and provide some valuable services and housing that's been much needed, a lot of affordable housing. Street improvements throughout the district include the Lentz Entryway Project and the Foster Road Streetscape Improvement Project. Investment in small business owners on the commercial corridors through the Prosperity Investment, Storefront Grant Program, the Development Opportunity Services Program, and the Green Features Grant Program. Investments in community and workforce organizations through community livability grants include Portland Youth Builders, Southeast Works, Zenger Farms, Rose Community Development, and Green Lentz. And the support for affordable housing comes through home repair and down payments assistance, and repair of existing affordable housing, and the development of a considerable number of affordable housing units in the district.
I think related to that last part then, are there specific partners that you're working with at the moment in Lentz, I guess on the development front?
Yeah, there's a new development currently in negotiations. I'm not sure the very latest update on the 92nd and.
Yeah, so we are negotiating with Palindrome, who was our partner for Oliver Station. So yes, we are continuing to engage with them on what we call the Phase 2 of Lentz Town Center.
And the projected length of the Phase 2 part, do you have a sense of that?
We are hoping to bring an agreement for consideration by the board next month or in August. And I think when we think of Phase 2, it's really for 92nd and Herald, which is the property adjacent to the Boys and Girls Club on 92nd and Herald. Those are the cross streets. So I don't know off the top of my head what the build out for that will be. But unlike the first stage where we had 4 major projects and a couple of other projects that came from it, I think this feels like it's going to be a significant kind of final project at the town center. The other outstanding area that was identified through the Lentz Town Center Action Plan was thinking about the Lentz floodplain and freeway lands, which is an area that has a number of industrial functions just to the north of the freeway. It's industrially zoned. It's in the floodplain. And so we've been working with our bureau partners to see whether there might be some investments that we would make to help businesses that are there to stay there, or to see what might happen with freeway lands. But we are kind of at the end of the Lentz Town Center urban renewal area. So while I know that the community still has a lot of ambitions, and so we're making good on some of our commitments there, in reality, we're a little bit in closeout mode and just making sure that our final investments really deliver on the highest community priorities.
Great. Jeff, of course.
One of our discussions behind this question, and I think that you just kind of referenced our thinking, is that, over the, Lentz being an example, over the 20 years, development is a long arc from initial concept to the final build-out, getting into closeout mode. And in the course of that time, you mentioned the community's ambitions. Those change as people move out and people move in. In general, how do you manage the community's expectations when your horizon is so much longer and doesn't turn on a dime? How do you do that?
It's such a good question because we wrestle with that every day. And So I don't think that there's, there is no one community. The community changes as it should. We are always appreciative of members who have been with us, members of the community who have been with us since the beginning and who hold us accountable to what we committed at the beginning and remind us why we began. And then we are also appreciative of new voices who bring in new energy and new perspectives. And so I think the board and our staff are really listening with two ears to what did we commit and what is new that we need to incorporate. And that is where projects like 92nd and Herald are made better by both considering what we committed to do in terms of having a really active use and something that could create a home for the farmers market, and what do people need now that they maybe didn't articulate a need 4 or 5 years ago, which is more affordable housing. And so I think it's a good example of a project that is made better by having really taken into account the full expression of the community.
Yeah, and I think in the Lentz neighborhood in particular, there's just been a lot of what seems like maybe conflicting viewpoints in terms of particularly affordable housing. But if you actually listen with both ears, you can actually find a lot of common ground. And I think it's pushing us in a really positive way to meet, I think, the objectives of the broader community in a way where we all can kind of share the same goals and bring more affordable housing, but also help support the local businesses and create spaces and services that have been lacking in that neighborhood. So I think it's pushing us. I mean, the community input has been, while it's been challenging, I think it's pushes us towards making sure that we develop a much better project that's going to be better serving that community. So, and I think pushing for more affordable housing as gentrification is really pushing on the borders of our city in neighborhoods that had been overlooked for a long time. It's changing the discussion, just like you said. The dynamics are very different than they were 10 years ago in Lentz.
Well, speaking of community voices, we read in the budget message, and Chair Cruz mentioned in his remarks about your Budget Advisory Committee, invaluable community input in your budget process. We like hearing that because we're here as sort of the professional citizen review group, and we like to hear increased citizen involvement in your budget process. What we would really like to know is whether you have an example or two you could share with us about how these voices translated into some emphasis or change or rethinking in your budget proposal. How did that work?
Yes. All right, I'll take a crack at that. So first of all, I can tell you that the Budget Advisory Committee has direct input into the decision packages that we request as an agency. But our more formal answer is the Budget Advisory Committee includes representatives from across Prosper Portland's areas of focus and provides input on both the general fund allocation and request and specific TIF district budgets. Some of this input is provided throughout the year from project and action plan advisory meetings in groups such as the North-Northeast Community Development Initiative, the Hill Block Advisory Committee, and the Old Town Chinatown District. During the budget process this year, the Budget Advisory Committee and community stakeholders reviewed and recommended 5 decision packages focused on adding general fund capacity to the Inclusive Business Resource Network, the Coordinated Community Development Planning on the Northeast Portland and East Portland, the Southwest Corridor, and Portland Means Progress. They also recommended changing grant and loan funding availability in the Interstate TIF District, funding improvements to the Foster floodplain in Lentz, and extending the last date to issue debt in Gateway to maximize resources, as well as reprogramming infrastructure improvements in North Macadam to address transportation needs. So quite a few adjustments recommended. Council ended up approving additional general fund resources for the Inclusive Business Resources Network, Portland Means Progress, and the Northeast Portland component of the community planning package. Most of the TIF district recommendations are under consideration for the 5-year forecast period, with the exception reallocating loan funds in the interstate district, which is included in the fiscal year 2019-20 approved budget. So as you can see, there was considerable input from the committee And we've tried to acknowledge that every year. So thank you.
So the other side of community engagement, well, I guess it's hard to call you all like community members exactly, but the other aspect of the government, the other aspect of oversight and decision-making is, you all, the board, and we're interested in kind of how you felt about your involvement in this budget, and we deal with a lot of different districts who handle it, differently. And so kind of wondered if there were things that you could call out specifically in this budget that you felt were, either initiated by the board or heavily modified by the board or removed by the board.
I think there's more of a general answer to this question.
That's fine, we can start there.
Since I've joined the board, there have been no specific board-initiated projects, but I would say the board does play a very involved and obviously important role in developing the budget, not only during the budget process, but during all the frequent reviews that we receive from Tony Barnes specifically, who I think does an excellent job, and I believe may have served on this commission or committee before. Is that right? That's right. Yeah. So very familiar with the ins and outs of that. Input from the board happens throughout the year and goes into development of the budget and, of course, of the financial forecast. As part of the budget process, the board does review and provide direction on the agency-wide work plan as part of our annual retreat, which happens in December, and then the draft budget in January, and then our annual budget work session before the requested budget is submitted to the City Council in February. So we're kept abreast of that, but there is an intensive work period during those holiday months. And I would just add, as on a personal and professional note, we each bring our unique perspectives to the table. I think it's part of what I enjoy about serving on the commission is that we come from diverse backgrounds and we're able to see different things. I'm a small business guy, I guess. And so I pay special attention to that section of the budget and make sure that, we're lining up the resources in the way that we're most efficient with their distribution and use, and that we're tracking the results as we've discussed before. So I think it's an interesting process, and I've been very impressed with the team that conducts it.
Great, thank you. Okay, no follow-up. And did anyone sign up from the public too? Okay, thank you. So with that, we will give our compliments to the district and close this hearing and then open a regular meeting of the TSCC. So first, I will ask my fellow commissioners if they have any comments or questions about the budget. Thank you. And then I'll ask our staff executive director to review any staff recommendations and present the certification letter.
Our review of the budget showed no violations of budget law, so it was prepared pursuant to budget law, and we recommend that you certify the budget without any objections.
Thank you. May I have a motion authorizing the commission to sign the certification letter as recommended by staff?
So moved.
Margot, and second? Second. Thank you. And I'll now call for a vote. All those in favor of certifying, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? And with that, the motion carries, and we adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for coming, and thanks for your hard work on this and your great questions. They really are thought-provoking and very helpful to us, so thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we will now reconvene the regular Prosper Portland Board meeting after some adjustments of the chairs.
I don't think we joined, but I work in IT and I'm like,
Something to look forward to. Love the shoes, by the way. Very cute.
All right. Okay, are we all ready? All right, our next item is to adopt the annual budget of Prosper Portland for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2019 and ending June 30, 2020, and making appropriations. This is resolution number 7314. And Tony Barnes will join us. Thank you. Welcome, Tony.
Good afternoon, Chair Cruz, Commissioners, Executive Director Branham. I'm Tony Barnes, Finance Manager at Prosper Portland. So I'm here today to present 7314, the annual budget for, adopting the annual budget for fiscal year 1920. Have a short presentation on a couple recommended changes, as well as our 5-year forecast for River District, an update on that, based on our last update that we provided in April. Before I begin, I'd like to give a special thanks to a lot of folks here at Prosper Portland, my budget team, Courtney Cohn and Francis Thurman, analysts, as well as the SCPC team, Myra, Justin, Lisa Abwaf, and the development team, and all the development staff, and Tori Campbell, and Trolls Adrian on the economic development team on putting the budget together over the last 6 months and getting us to this point. So a quick recap of where we've been over the last couple months. The mayor released his proposed budget at the end of April. We presented the Prosper Portland proposed budget to council on May 9th, and council approved that budget with changes on May 23rd. We just had the TSCC hearing approving the budget, and we're here today for adoption of the budget. A quick recap of what occurred with the City General Fund budget. A lot of numbers on this slide, so I apologize for that. But it illustrates all the programming that was adopted, approved, and then adopted by, I think, this afternoon by City Council with their adoption of the budget for a City General Fund allocation to Prosper Portland for community economic development, traded sector economic development, and other community development programming. So the total allocation this year is about $7.4 million that was adopted. That's included in this recommended adopted budget before you. Includes about $1.3 million in new, ongoing, and one-time money from the City General Fund. So about $344,000 in ongoing resources that will continue into the next couple fiscal years and ongoing. And then one-time dollars of $887,000 this year. And then that's in addition to the existing ongoing, the base budget for this year of $6.1 million. So that's a net difference of a little bit between $7.3 million and $6.5 million. $6.5 million is the current base budget for the current fiscal year. So an actual increase in the overall budget from the current fiscal year. This is a really good package that we ended up with for both community economic development as well as several other initiatives that were discussed throughout the entire budget process. So we included one-time funding for the Portland Film Office, ongoing and one-time funding for the Portland Means Progress Initiative, one-time and ongoing funding, additional funding for expansion of Mercatus and My People's Market, and the Inclusive Business Resource Network, as well as additional funding for community visioning around Albina Vision and Hill Block and Cully community-driven TIF projects. So that's included in the recommended adopted budget. Overall, over the years, the City General Fund over the last few years have ranged from $3.4 million to $6.6 million more. Most recently, we requested in January and February a budget of $7.7 million, and with this adopted budget, it'll be about $7.1 million in total from the city. So before you, in Exhibit A that's attached to the resolution, we are recommending a couple adjustments to what City Council approved. There's some minor adjustments for personnel and staffing related to student interns that are being added. It's about $11,000 that was not included previously in the budget, but it's consistent with prior year budgets that we had. Also, an additional $210,000 for economic development for allocation from the City of Portland in this last fiscal year for cannabis funds. This was not included in the original proposed budget or approved budget, but the city is including those funds now in their adoption of the budget. So we're including them as well in our version of the budget. So that could be deployed in the next fiscal year for technical assistance programming. And then finally, housing set-aside adjustment, just one adjustment received from the Portland Housing Bureau, around $500,000 for timing of the projects in Lintz, making sure that there's sufficient appropriation next year. So it's dollars they didn't spend this year that they'd like added into next fiscal year. So those three changes represent the changes from what council approved in May. So turning back to my budget update in April, one of the items I talked about was the 5-year forecast for River District and the out of balance in the forecast. So this is not specific to the action today, but is important over the next couple years as we look at balancing the budget over the next several years and look at trade-offs between different resources and expenditures. So up on the screen is the current 5-year forecast with a much more conservative revenue estimate, mainly around program income and property sales in the district, but also more conservative assumptions around expenditures with higher expenditures for certain commitments, both soft and hard commitments. On the resource side, there's about $60 million in cash, $24 million left in TIF to be issued over the next several years. And we put an assumption of about $10 million of property sale. This is down quite a bit from over $40 million or $50 million that we had in prior forecasts. Loan income about $2.4 million, and then there's some other income sources about 4.7. So about $116 million in resources. But in the 5-year forecast, we've included costs related to Broadway Quarter, as we discussed during the TSCC hearing, of about $50.5 million related to holding costs, demo costs, relocation of the retail site, but also $10 million of infrastructure improvements, which we'll discuss a little bit more in a minute. There's a housing set-aside remaining amount of $16 million that's dedicated to the Housing Bureau and the housing set-aside policy. There's $17 million for Old Town Chinatown investment strategy, made up the River District portion of the full $57 million commitment. About $1.7 million in PIP and CLG grant programming that's outside of the Old Town Chinatown investment commitment. $37 million in interest and principal related to the general fund backed interim line of credit that was used to fund a number of projects, including the Multnomah County Health Headquarters Department and other infrastructure projects in the district that went above and beyond what we forecast TIF could pay for. Property management, about $18 million, and staff and overhead over the next 5 years of about $25 million, which represents about 20% of the total for the 5-year forecast, or a little over 20%. And that could change based on how the workload in the agency shifts between different districts and funding sources. However, looking back at this collection of expenditures in the 5-year forecast, some commitments are more stronger than others. For example, the housing set-aside is very specific. There are line of credit, principal, and interest payments that have to be made, property management costs that have to be made. But there might be property management costs in that $18 million if we dispose of property that would fall off this forecast as a result. So there's different decision points along the way over the next couple of years that greatly influence the forecast. Not in the forecast are potential resources that we didn't include potential replacement of infrastructure investment for the post office site. As I mentioned, there's about $10 million of expenditures related to parks and transportation for the post office and Broadway corridor. Those would qualify for system development charge funding from parks and transportation as an option. B, maximize estimated return on remaining property value. As I mentioned, we only included a very conservative estimate of about $10 million in the forecast for property sale income. If we count Centennial Mills, Block R, other parcels in the property, plus other $20 million perhaps for several parcels in the post office, Broadway corridor area, potentially up to over $30 million in value. Interim parking at the post office, we're moving forward with putting that in place for the surface lots and the garage. Over 10 years, forecast that potentially could net about $1.3 million per year. So if it extends all the way out for 10 years, that adds up to over $12 million. So that's subject to a lot of change as well. And then allocation by City Council of future River District defeasance. We've talked a lot about the boomerang and the role of boomerang in the financial sustainability plan. When River District pays off all the TIF bonds in 2022, about $10 million will be coming back to the City General Fund in 2023. At $8.8 million per year over 4 years, that could add up to $35 million to support the line of credit there. Those are options that we have to engage on with partners and City Council over the next year, several years. So it's an ongoing discussion, and as I mentioned, it's nothing specific in our adopted budget, recommended adopted budget for today for fiscal year 1920. But as we continue this discussion over the next couple months, over the next year, as we start up the budget process for fiscal year 2021, we're really going to have to focus on the status of these, where these are, and also where the projects are in the forecast. And so as we check in at every step of the way. So with that, there's no specific recommendations that we have regarding these items at this time, but wanted to provide a kind of a comprehensive update of the funding, the look at the 5-year forecast and what some of the options are and might be unfolding over the next few years. So I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the recommended adopted budget before you and the 5-year forecast as well.
Questions?
Well, you showed some potential resources that could offset that gap. What about any potential for decreasing the costs, expenditures?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be scrutinizing that every step of the way. I mentioned on the property management side, there are several properties that if we dispose of, those costs would be eliminated from the 5-year forecast. We're currently carrying, in most cases, a very conservative assumption about property management costs all the way through the 5-year forecast, assuming that we're going to hold those properties and those costs will escalate over the time. So there's potential savings, not only revenue from those properties if they're disposed of, but also savings from holding those properties. And then we'll be looking at and revisiting estimates around the Broadway corridor programming and other areas as well. There are grant programs, I mentioned $1.7 million, that aren't specifically committed and aren't committed to any specific action plan or strategy within River District, so that's an option as well to look at that.
Other questions, comments? Okay. Thanks very much, Tony. It's great. Good presentation, and I really appreciate the explanation of some of the possibilities to bridge the gap. So thank you. All right, then, would someone like to make a motion to approve the budget resolution?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Budget resolution passes. Thank you so much. Thanks
you
for all
very
your
much.
great work on this.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, number 9 is an action item authorizing a $75,000 grant to Greater Portland, Inc. And Trolls Adrian. Business and Industry Manager, will present. Thank you, trolls.
Thank you, Chair Cruz, Commissioners, Executive Director Branham. I am, again, Trolls Adrian, Manager for the Business and Industry Team here at Prosper Portland, and I am here to seek the Commission's approval to authorize a $75,000 grant for Greater Portland, Inc. for fiscal year 2019-2020. And with the earlier discussion around this, I just wanted to call your attention to the fact that Mr. Matt Miller, the interim CEO of Greater Portland Inc., is in the audience should you have any questions or clarifications needed from the grant recipient themselves. As it relates to the Prosper Portland strategic plan, our work with Greater Portland Inc., which I will probably manage to refer to as GPI a few times, so I'll just call that out. It falls within primarily two of our four strategic plan objectives. Of course, primarily around jobs, since as you will learn very shortly, this is GPI primarily does work around regional marketing, recruitment, and competitiveness, but also partnerships because of the work that GPI does for our region in convening conversations on economic development. So a little bit about Greater Portland, Inc. They are the designated regional economic development organization for our metropolitan statistical area, so that includes Southwest Washington as well. They are a public-private partnership with about 70 organizations involved. And you can see it's the mission of GPI there at the bottom of the screen. The relationship between Prosper Portland and Greater Portland Inc. goes back around 10 years. So we started funding the organization in fiscal year 2010-2011. The range of funding has been from about around $50,000, not 50, this says on the screen there, to around $119,000. And as I mentioned, we are seeking $75,000 for the upcoming fiscal year. The proportion of funding in GPI's budget is around 50% public, 50% private. And this really represents an important way for us to realize an efficient and holistic approach to economic development. That's the critical part of this partnership. So Greater Portland, Inc. focuses on regional marketing, business recruitment once that marketing pays off into companies actually looking at the region, and then cross-jurisdictional collaboration, which are areas that they are very good at. And I think it's important to call out when it comes to particularly marketing and recruitment, that is really a regional approach is needed there. Companies, when they choose where to locate, rarely start at a jurisdictional level. When they make decisions, they start at a regional level. So having somebody being able to not only answer the phone, but also market and present the region benefits us actually more than if we were leading that work ourselves. And it also, moreover, frees up our traded sector team to focus on things that we do very well around inclusive cluster initiatives, business retention, and business expansion work. I also want to point out that the work that Greater Portland Inc. then does serves as a pipeline into some of that cluster work for us, and I can certainly provide examples of that if needed. Around the results of GPI for the past fiscal year, we are getting a really, really strong return on investment for our $75,000 contribution, which is our current year contribution as well. Out of the 14 companies that GPI located since the beginning of 2018, 12 have located in the city of Portland. You'll see some additional details here on foreign-owned and TIF districts, resulting in 673 direct jobs. And Executive Director Branham mentioned the Genentech recruitment earlier, which represents 300 of those jobs. And that was led by GPI in partnership with Business Oregon and us. Regional marketing also very effective. I should note that the 800 million impressions mentioned here include articles in places like the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and CNN Money. So GPI gets a very wide reach for the work that they do. And I also don't want to leave out the very important role that the organization plays in convening our region around economic development conversations. So they are the convening organization for Greater Portland 2020, which is the strategic plan for the region, but also Greater Portland Global, which is a strategy that governs international trade, including attraction of foreign direct investment. GPI was also critical in working with Metro in creating what's called the Economic Value Atlas with the Brookings Institution, which we believe has a lot of promise in terms of identifying spatial ways of doing strategy on equitable economic development. And then I also mentioned the Diversity and Leadership series, which is a series that focuses on how we solve for one of our critical competitive challenges around diversity, particularly in our executive and director level positions within the private sector in the region. Yes?
I might have missed it, but what was the time frame for those stats?
So they are, funny story, the Greater Portland Inc. reports on a calendar year basis, but we will be receiving a full annual report that is on a fiscal year basis in August. So most of these stats are since the beginning of calendar year 2018, but the majority of the numbers in here refer to to our fiscal year. That is a little complicated, but roughly since January 1st, 2018, yes. But we will share with the board the final annual report that where it's been broken out by our fiscal year, which is on the right reporting cycle for us when that comes in August. A little bit around the 2019-2020 deliverables. What we're asking Greater Portland Inc. to focus on in the coming fiscal year is detailed here. I'll just call out one in the interest of time of each. Around recruitment, we anticipate really starting to ramp up our work on the Broadway quarter anchor recruitment strategy. This is a critical objective in order for us to be able to meet our equity outcomes, equitable economic development outcomes, for the Broadway quarter is, of course, to attract market rate tenants that can fill a lot of the office space there. And so we will be collaborating with Greater Portland Inc. and others on that particular item. Around regional marketing, we do a lot of work with GPI on doing joint calls to both site selection professionals and also on trade missions, direct calls to companies to present the Portland region, where our team often serves as the industry experts due to our expertise in cluster development. And so we will continue to do that. And around convening and strategy, Greater Portland Inc. has done a lot in terms of discussing the nexus between equity and competitiveness at a regional scale. And we are very pleased to see that because it aligns well with our mission and our values as an organization. So that's work that we are encouraging GPI to continue to do. A little bit around the equity impact of this work, which is always important for us to talk about. Greater Portland Inc. is one of the founding partners in Portland Means Progress and is designated as the regional entity should other communities around the region choose to take up similar initiatives. Greater Portland Inc. has already committed to being the lead in doing so. Really importantly, we've also had a very interesting conversation over the past year around how do we ensure that our incentive programs for traded sector companies create equitable outcomes. So of course, we at Prosper Portland have been requiring public benefit agreements for our enterprise zone program, and we are now seeing other communities around the region taking an interest and in certain cases even following suit in certain ways in tightening up some requirements around their enterprise zone programs due to some of these conversations. And that's been happening at the table that GPI has convened. GPI also serves an important role in terms of being a mediator around regional grant applications. So you'll see an example here from around JP Morgan Chase. And then finally, really valuable, specific to our enterprise zone program, market intelligence. We actually joined GPI in Chicago last year to meet with site selection consultants and to basically ask them the question around public benefit agreements. What do you all think? Are there any holes in this program as you can see it? And we got some absolutely critical feedback in terms of how we implement the enterprise zone program from that trip. So that's things that we are going to continue to do together with GPI. So with that, are there any questions?
Questions for anybody?
Thank you. So just with a few things, when Ashley Henry came to present at the very beginning, I just want to try to reconcile some of what she expressed and sort of what's happening with the data you presented today. So she indicated that their trip that they took, the best practice trip to San Francisco, they were looking at sort of some of the cost of development, and the words that she used were super commutes and unintended suffering, really sort of considering the human impact. And if the discussion around sort of being more inclusive and equitable in, this concept of upward economic mobility, if it's more of a concept and a word or a practice. So with that being said, some of the stats that you gave, I want to maybe try to get a little bit more granular. So in terms of the equity impact, you said that 6 out of 12 were foreign owned, 8 out of 12 were TIF, in TIF regions, and it resulted in a little over 673 jobs. How many out of those, like if we were to break them down, what are the demographics? Who were they supporting? And then in addition to that, I think what was also expressed is that the folks who are privileged enough to convene at the GPI tables may not directly represent physically the kind of diversity that we're seeking in terms of these particular investments. So I'm just curious as to how you reconcile, or how that's being reconciled, or how that's being discussed, and how some of that feedback is being given to GPI. I know it's kind of a lot of comments, but I'm just trying to figure out how real time this is happening.
Sure. So just I want to make sure that I understand your question correctly. So the first question was around demographics on
The numbers, yeah, to
Yes.
break those down a little more.
Yeah, so we do not have the ability to track who people or who companies hire when they locate in the city, with the exception of companies that take advantage of one of our programs, support programs. So for example, the Enterprise Zone program, where we are starting to build in some of that functionality. So the only time we would have any kind of information like that would be if the company themselves were to volunteer the information. I can, to some extent, speak to Genentech because the company themselves indicated in the site selection process that they picked the Lloyd District because of its access to a diverse workforce and transit accessibility. And they have some really, really strong goals around this, but they're not, as a publicly traded corporation, would typically not release, granular data to the public around that.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking the question is because I'm like, is it an opportunity? I think what Ashley was asking today was a very important question.
Yep.
Is there an opportunity if we're giving money to GPI to more effectively partner and ask for these things, to ask for it to be more of a focus?
Yeah.
I don't think it's unreasonable. The other thing I would like to, I know there were a few other questions and other people have questions, but the other thing was around, one of the deliverables was the gap analysis on the current ecosystem. So that's what GPI typically does. Will we be able to see that as a board? Will we be able to get
Sure, I think
that
so.
analysis?
Yes, so that gap analysis is essentially done on an ongoing basis. So the way that, and I would say to some extent, some of these questions I think would be best asked of GPI themselves, and we can certainly
here?
be in the, yes.
Oh, okay. Hi. Great.
Mr. Miller, would you like to join the table? Welcome. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
So before moving on to Mr. Miller, I will certainly say that from our perspective at Prosper Portland, we of course lead with our mission when we engage in conversations at a regional scale, and we do so also in our conversations at Greater Portland, Inc. And yes, we can keep the board apprised on essentially what we call the gap analysis around where gaps are needed. What that actually refers to in this particular case is that we've had some conversations around where does it make sense for us to collaborate regionally on things like foreign direct investment attraction, right? So that's just an example of that. So it goes on more on an ongoing basis than in a strategic way, but I also know that Greater Portland, Inc., of course, has a strategic plan that they convene around, where I think that is done in a more formal way, but I will let Matt answer.
No, I think he encapsulated it. Certainly, if there are more specific data points or items that are of interest, I'd be happy to bring that to the table and discuss that. And I do think, to your earlier point about demographics, I think that'd be a very interesting thing that we'd love to partner on.
Thank you.
Can you just elaborate on what kind of demographic data you would have on, like, the job creation numbers, and can you elaborate on that at
Yeah,
all? And
sure.
any challenges or opportunities there might be to
Yeah.
strengthen it?
The data that we collect generally are wage data, occupation profiles, count of jobs, and things of that nature. To Troll's point, we need to have partnerships with the companies and encourage them to share demographic data. And I think the companies that we are talking about bringing to this region are very interested in their impact to the region. So I think that's a great next step for our partnership with Prosper to be reaching out to these companies to continue to engage them in community building and community cooperation and communication. So I think, the partnership already with Genentech has been great. Some of their grant making that they've done in the market already, and their emphasis on hiring from diverse populations. So that would be something that we'd love to sit down with their community liaison with Prosper Portland and talk about how we can understand exactly what their profile looks like, who has benefited from employment there, what their pathway options are, the variety of economic and social outcomes that we want to see through this sort of economic activity.
And I'm sorry, the other part of the question that I had was around the quality improvement aspect of GPI. Like, what's your continuous quality improvement mechanism? How are you ensuring that there are multiple diverse voices at the table that's informing your process? And I think that that's what Ashley was speaking to today. So I just wanted to might you shed some light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are multiple avenues in which we're continuously updating our engagement. We have 70 stakeholders, and we have collectively counted a bunch of small communities as one there, so we technically have about 90 stakeholders. 50% are from the public sector, whether that's cities, counties, states, not investor rather, ports, community colleges, universities, and then private sector partners. And there are various investment levels that they're investing at, but that doesn't beholden us to just engaging with them. Our 2020 council is led by majority non-investor folks. Our board chair is not an investor for 2020. And so we welcome the opportunity to engage multiple stakeholders on how we can continue to deliver within the frameworks that people want us to deliver in. Maybe a little more, I would say that we have a work plan that we work on every year in partnership with our board, with our community partners. The 2020 council will be, we will be reworking that opportunity because the 5-year SEDS is coming to a close in 2021. 2020 begin the next process for updating that regional strategy. So this is it's opportune to be thinking about new stakeholders right now.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Peter?
Yeah, some questions more about employers. I mean, the recruitment starts obviously with the company, getting them to relocate or move here, start up facilities, but also in keeping and retaining and attracting talent, right? And so I'm curious, over the time that you've been with GPI, what have you seen in terms of the trends in the companies selecting Portland for some of its equitable aspirations? Sure. And what do you see in terms of what's shared from the company's perspective, employers' perspectives, in terms of attracting and retaining employees who want to move to a community and join a cluster of businesses that have some of that same mindset?
Yeah, sure. I think the conscientiousness within which we all operate in Greater Portland, in particular in the city of Portland, is very attractive to companies. I think a lot of the companies that are looking at this place are willing to pay, the costs of being in a more expensive West Coast market like Greater Portland because, because of the collaborative spirit that we have here and, dedication to concepts of justice. And so this resonates a lot. And I don't see that changing. In fact, I see that growing. With regard to talent, obviously talent is, I'd say it's the driver of why companies are choosing this region. We don't compete on cost, we compete on value. And people are attracted to places that are progressive in nature, that are investing in place, that care about how we evolve and how we develop. I think a lot of what we see are people frustrated with the way economic opportunity has changed the nature of the cities from which they come. And I think they are seeking out places like Greater Portland to start afresh to some degree. And so that's very attractive to companies, and I don't think that's going to change.
So how could, maybe some suggestions as to what role Prosper can play in the future in helping channel some of that energy or capture it or direct it and facilitate discussions? Because if it's there or if it's growing, it's something obviously that we want to hear about and then find a way to engage more constructively.
Absolutely, and I think, Portland Means Progress is a great example of how we can bring the new entrants to the market into the fold and have them reinforce a lot of the work that we've been trying to achieve collectively as a community and as a region. And then that's a best practice that we can scale regionally. And so what's very fascinating about our region is there's a lot of experimentation on each community level. And we get to, through this regional collaboration, see what's working and what doesn't, and we pivot and we keep going with what's working. And I think it's reinforcing a lot of the great things about this place.
To draft off an earlier question Commissioner Moreland-Poya had, and also that was directed towards Ashley Henry, who was here earlier. You have a better view of the landscape, kind of the bigger economic development landscape than we do. In your role, and so where do you feel amidst the groups of collaborators, including GPI, who do you think would be sort of best positioned to really forcefully address the equitable question, right? And find a way in which we can articulate to the public at large how we're going to develop differently than, say, Seattle and San Francisco has, because everyone looks at them as cautionary tales, right? Like, we don't want that to happen,
Right.
And yet. I think we've struggled to find a way to tell a different story and to show how that is not going to happen, right? So that's, I think, part of our role is within the commission and also for entities like GPIs. What is that story and how do we tell it?
That's a complicated question. Well, I think, the 2020 effort that we undertook 5 years ago was, I think, the first real serious regional strategy on a comprehensive economic development strategy basis from the Economic Development Administration. It was the first real time, I think, we were trying to sit down and figure out what are those North Stars that we can try to collectively go after. I think there's a lot of things to be learned from that exercise, whether it's, jurisdictional control over things, or it's competing interests across markets, across submarkets here, whether it's different ideas and conceptions of what economic development is. It's resources, it's a number of things. It's the fact that economic development is one piece, and then there's the policy world, and that's another set of pieces that need to be figured out. We are not a chamber, we don't focus on policy, we are trying to bring people together with the evidence of trying to work to build local economies, to share that with the policymakers. So I think we need to continue to I think it's going to be a lot of trial and error, and we just have to keep what the common North Star concerns are to us and keep at it. I don't have a good answer off the top of my head. I do think that we do have a wealth of learnings from this last SEDS process, the Greater Portland 2020 process, and I think that will, and that's also factoring into our own strategic discussions that our executive committee is having about the direction of GPI and what value it serves to its investors and partners. So I think this is an opportune time to kind of pick that apart and try to figure out how to make that better.
And I just want to augment this point, because I think that was my initial point, is that there is some data.
Yeah.
That data, I'm wondering how you get access to it. You have folks who have gone on these best practice trips. They have some data, they've analyzed it, they have some recommendations.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how that translates into the larger, working, fluid, evolving vision of GPI to meet not just this aspirational goal.
Sure.
But I think we have a responsibility to be mindful of the human impact of economic development and the unintended suffering. We can no longer just have them as words, but to actually pay attention to them and let that drive the next sort of phase of development and who we bring to the table. So that was really my question. How is GPI doing that? If we've got the data, we want to be data-driven. How are you accessing that? Who's at the table that's bringing that information to you?
Can I, I've participated in many of the best practices trips, and I sit on the Greater Portland board. So Randy Miller, actually, when he was then a PDC commissioner, started the best practices trips, and I think over 20-some years has been taking people regularly to them. What I've seen over the last, I don't know, 7, 8, I can't remember how long I've been, but that I've been, and particularly through partnership with First Stop Portland, that they have become increasingly focused on learning. Greater Portland, Inc. came actually from a best practices trip to Austin, where there was a model of public-private regional economic development organization. One of the things, as I was also on the Bay Area best practices trip, and so it was interesting to hear Ashley's reflection on it, because I had a very different perspective on it. And I think that one of the things that happens in those is you have a shared experience, but not everybody comes away with the same lessons learned or the same best practices sense. So, I think that, I guess from my perspective, the best practices trip is really a co-learning experience that cultivates civic engagement. I'm not sure that it's currently designed to then lead to action, and I think we could have a conversation around whether that's the best approach or not. It's pretty geared towards informing private sector partners about what is happening in the public sphere. So we went and talked to the Oakland transportation system, and they talked about what their local transportation system is. So I think it would be worthwhile to go in. I would say that while it's linked to Greater Portland, Inc., there's not generally a huge focus on economic development practices. Although we did hear some. My takeaway from the trip is that, and this is one of the things that I would say for Seattle and San Francisco alike, which is you cannot talk about creating economic opportunity and not want to have development happen. So San Francisco has had tremendous investment and tremendous job growth, and has had neighborhoods that have not wanted to have any growth. And so you have this huge disconnect. So when I look at it, it's, yes, there's the economic side of it, but there's also and people would not allow development to happen. So anyway, I think that there's a lot to unpack there that then leads into the strategy, which is exactly the question of where does that conversation happen? Does it happen on the Metro Council? Does it happen amongst electeds? Does it happen in this public-private forum? Does it happen at Greater Portland 2020? I think is a really important thing to dig into.
And I think it should.
Yes.
As someone who lived outside of San Francisco for a while, I can tell you that I know friends who make $300,000 a year and they live with roommates. Mm-hmm. That should not be Portland's future.
No,
so I'm saying
absolutely not.
the reality is that
Yeah.
yes, everybody
Yes.
may have emerged from that trip with different understandings. I'm saying if this is an opportunity to have a conversation about what we can do different and thinking moving forward, because I feel like if we continue to do the same things that we've done before, and we have that, you know what the definition of that is. And I'm a psychiatrist, so I don't have to explain that to you. So the bottom line is, I guess what I'm trying to put forth is a have you considered moment. Have we considered the opportunities for greater learning, and not just number data. Quantitative and qualitative data is just as important as the quantitative data. So there are some things that we know for sure. And if we're working to avoid those things, I think that there has to be a thoughtful way.
Yep.
I don't think we should just be going on trips and not without there being some utility of the knowledge that's brought back. And so I'm really offering this as a have you considered and a respectful, gentle challenge.
Well, I appreciate that very much. I will say that this is not an official trip of GPI. It's one of our board members that does this on his own accord. And that said, we have been joining it because there are a variety of stakeholders that go on these trips that we want to talk to and learn from, because they're coming from different perspectives. And, there's economic development, and as I was just talking about earlier, there is a lot of policy that also needs to happen, whether it's housing and transportation or a variety of other levers that need to be pulled to address potential impacts of economic development. I will say that we are very much interested in understanding what it is that our community partners want from recruitment opportunities. If you look at the average size of the employment by a project that we've done, and you take out Genentech and one other large project, and those are atypical for us, the average size is about 27 jobs per company. So we're working really to make sure that we're, at least in the city of Portland, recognize that economic diversity is going to be really important, international diversity in the projects that we're bringing in. But we are always looking at how we can adjust that particular piece and then bringing any intelligence from the work that we're doing, whether it's assisting our companies on retention and expansion efforts or the recruitment work, to those policymakers to help them understand. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the Bay Area, and I'm encouraged by the idea that we should be trying to glean more from those sorts of engagements.
Okay, all right. All right then, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So we'll go ahead and I'd like to take a motion to approve resolution number 7312. Somebody like to offer that up? Okay, thank you. We have a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right. The grant is approved. Thank you very much for your great feedback and presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for being here. I think, sorry, Mr. Lowell. I think we're going to just switch up our agenda items. We're going to flip them because we have a number of community members here to testify on behalf of the Old Town Chinatown update. So given that we're running about 45 minutes behind, and thank you for your patience for waiting through all of our presentations, I think we'll go with that item next, and then we'll go to approving the guidelines. And we'll hustle along a little faster. So would Bernie Krosky like to come up and join us? Bernie, are you here? Yes. All right, so this is an information item. It's an update on the Old Town Chinatown Action Plan.
Caught me off guard a little bit. I thought.
Yes, sorry.
It's all right. Keep
We're
on my toes.
running way behind, so,
Appreciate that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Several of us are parked in the garage, so we're keeping an eye on the clock.
So, Chair Cruz, Commissioners, Executive Director Brown, thank you for, let's see, is that on? There we go. Okay, how's that? That better? Okay, great. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to tell you a little bit about and give you an update on the Old Town Chinatown 5-year action plan. So, but before I launch into what I have to say, there's some members of the public and some stakeholders that have come here to give testimony too about their experiences in Old Town Chinatown and talk about the plan. There's also some support staff, our bureau partners, Portland Housing Bureau, Carl Dinkelspiel is here. Gabe Graff from PBOT's here. They won't be presenting, but they're here to answer questions if there's anything about transportation or housing issues come up. Also, Lisa Frisch from the Portland Business Alliance is here to present a letter of support for the action plan from the Business Alliance, and I'll ask Lisa if Lisa will give that to Justin, so that could be passed out. Okay. Okay, so the run of show for this is, the strategic plan alignment, how does this align? What was their community participation? What's the context for this? Why was this action plan even formulated in the first place? You know, where's the area of focus? It's very complex down here with different URAs, different historic districts. What were the priorities, or are the priorities for this current action plan? And most importantly, what was accomplished in these 5 years? That's what we want to know. What did we learn from this? And going forward, and then, of course, also what equity impact did this have or is having in the future? Okay, so in terms of strategic plan alignment, we think this is this plan and down here is a home run. It hits everything: jobs, building a great neighborhood, opportunities for prosperity, and then a lot of it is great partnerships within the community, between the community, us, and also city bureaus. This has been very much a collaborative affair. Public participation, so this goes back again 5 years. It started in 2014. There was a lot of work done on this for multiple stakeholders, bureaus, property owners. There was months of work that went into this. I have Helen Ying here from the Community Association, could probably give you a better background on this than I can. She was involved in this and all the work that went into putting this originally together. So again, what's the context? So, you know, the Community Association, Prosper Portland, bureaus, and other stakeholders, you know, got together to put this together to address about 4 major issues. One of them, you know, an imbalances of uses and an identity for the area. Imbalance of uses is too much of some things, maybe not enough of another. A lot of social services, a lot of entertainment, not enough things that can make up a good community, services, retail, other things that were missing, you know, in this neighborhood. So it was not that the services are bad or the entertainment, but just an imbalance of these uses was an issue. And then, of course, crime, you know, not just a real and a perceived issue of crime down here, to do something about that, and safety issues. Stagnant development in both private and public lots. So some of this is due to investment going to less riskier places. It was easier to invest in the Pearl District than here. Also, I would say you have a lot of issues with, you can see in this graphic here, we have a lot of unreinforced masonry buildings down here, historic buildings that we'd love to see developed, but they're very costly, and then when you try to pencil it out with the rent and these small buildings, sometimes it's hard to make that work. So that was has been an impediment too. And then lack of district connectivity, both within and getting into the district, out of the district, and within the district, there's been issues of connectivity. So those were the 4 major ones that why this plan was put together back in 2014. And so where is this plan? What's the focus area? So this map is kind of flipped on its side. So west is, as you figured out, I'm sure already, on the top of it. So goes all the way to the park blocks, then kind of jogs down Broadway, avoids the post office, comes up the Broadway Bridge, and goes down across Burnside, basically following the Skidmore Old Town Historic District boundaries. So that's one of the complexities of working down here. We got 2 different historic districts. We've got Skidmore Old Town, and then we've got a new Chinatown, Japantown historic district. And then also, there's also, as you know, 2 different URAs down here. We have downtown waterfront. We also have the River District, which kind of intertwine, which adds another level of complexity. And then how was this carved up? How was the plan carved up? So it was looked to address into these 3 areas. Number 1, of neighborhood investment, you know, getting at the private properties, our properties, the connectivity issue, business vitality, getting jobs, employment down here, helping entrepreneurs, cluster industry, and then district livability. That's addressing the safety, and then also very important, the cultural preservation, because we have the Lintz Chinese Gardens and the Portland Chinatown Museum and other cultural treasures that we have down here. So what was accomplished over that time? So, you know, some of the major accomplishments, you know, in terms of 260 moderate income housing. The goal was 500, a little bit short on that. But, you know, we're pleased to say there's been a lot of renovation and construction. You can see the Society Hotel went in, the Hoxton Hotel, 38 Davis with over 80,000 square feet of commercial space and 65 residential units. The Multnomah County Health Facility, that beautiful headquarters that just came in, 150,000 square feet, and with 350 employees coming in, which we've have yet to feel the whole weight of that down here. PNCA College, 1,500 students and staff, and then the WeWork at the Customs House renovation. Another overview. In terms of jobs, which was another goal, the goal was 500. There's been over 600 new living wage jobs created over the last 5 years. 10% increase over base, and also a 28% increase in wages for $97 million over additional wages created. And then in terms of the new jobs, not only the new jobs, but some great retail stores and restaurants opening here. We had Mimir Mole, Charlie's Deli, Deadstock Coffee, Pine Street Market, Starbucks Coffee, Produce Organic, Streetwear, Laundry, PDX, expansion of Ground Control, the gaming place, and then professional services, the Pencil Academy, the Sneaker Academy is expanded. WeWork went into the Customs House, Airbnb, and Anchor and Moisen in 38 Davis across from the garage. And then Movable Software Design, which is our neighbor just behind us on the other part of the block. And then University of Oregon expanded too, also into 38 Davis. So there's been a lot of activity, a lot of businesses come in here, which is really great to see. And in terms of livability, we've invested over $1.3 million in community livability grants and special authority grants. Some of these went to Lantsu Chinese Gardens. Others went to some of the other cultural institutions down here, like the Portland Chinatown Museum and other institutions down here. So what are some of the lessons learned? Well, I think a major one was that the collaboration is really important, that we as an agency can't do this on our own. It's utterly impossible. The challenges are here. We need everybody working together, to make this happen. I think another one too is it had the last plan had more of an implicit. We need a more explicit focus on equity and who we're going to help and why we're going to do that. And I think also is what we're facing now. Some of the sites that did develop were some of the easier sites that were on the edge, that didn't require so much public investment. But what remains down here is most likely going to need some public investment, especially if there's going to be public parking to replace some of the parking that's being lost. The private sector isn't replacing that right now. So those are some of the lessons. There's more, but those are probably some of the major ones that we think we've learned. And then going forward, so our hope is to come back in August with an updated action plan. It'll be similar to what we have right now, but there's more opportunities. There's things that haven't been done that we want to do, and so we're going to ask you to extend that action plan another 5 years, and then we'll go to City Council and also them ask for their permission to move forward with another 5 years and get their endorsement. And so what are some of the things that will be focused on? Well, district parking implementation. We didn't quite get that done. So that has to be, because on the good side, we see this development happening, but we're losing the parking for the cultural institutions and to support the businesses down here. We're not looking to go above, or it's not even a one-to-one replacement, but if we at least can replace some of this. There's also a need for more middle-income housing. Down here, about 75% of the housing is in some way or another low-income or subsidized, so we need more middle-income housing. There's been a lot developed, but not quite enough. And then a way to develop these unreinforced masonry buildings, and especially in the core of the historic district. It's been working on larger buildings because you've got a larger area of rent to spread that out over, but for a small building, this has been a nut we still haven't been able to crack yet. And then redevelopment of Prosper Portler owned property and private property. So we're really excited to know that I'll let you know, we have 2 RFPs on the street right now for 4th and Burnside, which is right next to the Chinese Gate. And we also have one for Block 25, which is just here to the north between Gleason and Flanders and 3rd and 4th. Those are both due at the end of June. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that we're going to get some really good proposals and get that moving. In terms of private sites, well, just to the south of us, we have Block 33. Guardian Management owns that. That's on hold right now because of the LUBA appeal, because of the zoning issues, the height issue. So they're waiting for that. But that's going to go within the next few years. And then we also have Lantsu Chinese Gardens has a purchase and sale agreement with Northwest Natural for Block 24, the block just to the north of them, to do a cultural center. So those are 2 sites that we don't control, but most likely would play some role in that. And then let's see what else, more neighborhood serving retail. We've done a lot of outreach on these 2 RFPs, and we heard over and over again about people wanting just businesses that they can go to so they don't have to leave the neighborhood, to get their groceries or to get basic services. And then of course, progress on district livability. we have, so Helen Ying is here, and then also with Stan Penkin from the Pearl District Association. They co-chaired the Joint Task Force on homelessness, and they're going to talk a little bit about, not just yet. Okay, I guess they're coming, okay, so looks like they've joined me already, so.
Surrounded you.
Yeah, they've got me surrounded, so let's see. So so let me just finish up here. So in terms of equity impact, so there's been a lot of support given to the cultural institutions down here, and so that obviously will continue. But also what we've also done recently is we've had a focus on loans and grants to entrepreneurs of color. There's a real exciting development down here, kind of the sneaker and streetwear subgroup or classification is really taken off and starting to take off down here. And we've been fortunate enough with our economic development group to help bring some entrepreneurs down here, make this area aware that this is something that can happen. And we're forming a little bit of a cluster here. So at least one of the gentlemen that's involved with that will be here to testify too. And then finally, questions. So I guess there's going to be a.
We'll just go straight to public testimony. We're short on time, so please join us.
Hi, Commissioners and Kimberly. Thank you for taking time to for us to share some thoughts with you today. So I'm Helen Ying, and I chair the Old Town Community Association. I just want to start to share with you how I got involved. My previous work as a vice principal in a high school, and a student I suspended didn't return to school, but I ran into him here, just right along the bus mall. He came up to me and he gave me a hug and he says, "Mrs. Ying, what are you doing here? This is a dangerous part of town." When I heard that from a young person, who's a teenager, I just thought, I got to do something about this. This is Chinatown, where I have a lot of affinity. And so I got involved, and that was back in 2010. And I've been serving on the Old Town Community Association board since 2012. So I've been, active here for a decade. So just to kind of share with you, it's not just me, but a lot of our board members and people who help out in the neighborhood. We have, logged many hours being involved in helping to make this neighborhood better. And just to say that earlier, Bernie mentioned how important it is for public and private to partner together. And we want to thank you for the support of the $30,000 matching grant that had helped support us to contract with a person to help with the revitalization work. And we have raised over $100,000 over the past few years to help match that grant. And Bernie had mentioned about how some things have already been developing and new life has been breathed into this neighborhood, which we're very excited. However, there's a lot more work remain to be done, and that's why we're asking for the extension. And we're actually poised and in a better position now. We have seen what has not been working, and I believe it was Commissioner, I can't say your name, you have mentioned if we keep doing the same thing the same way, that is insanity, right? And so we are, at the cusp of looking at how to do things differently. And so one of the things is that we're excited, and I invited my partner in crime here, Stan Penkin, who is the president of the Pearl District Neighborhood Association. As you can see, we're not trying to do this all by ourselves. We're doing this in collaboration. So about a year ago, the city wanted to site another shelter in this neighborhood. We were fighting back and fighting hard. But they said, no, we're going to do it anyways. So we said, okay, if you're going to do this, you got to help us to create a set of strategies that really address public safety and livability and improve social services in this neighborhood. So we formed a task force. This task force has met since April of 2018. May 2019, we finalized our work. We have a set of recommendations on how to improve social services in our neighborhood, as well as livability and public safety. along with a good neighbor agreement with a shelter that is going in the Pearl District as well as the Old Town neighborhood. And that's organized by Oregon Harbor of Hope. So we have a good neighbor agreement with them, and that's going to be part of the work that this joint task force is going to continue in. I'm going to ask Stan to talk about the implementation phase, which we are launching. And that is one of the examples how we're doing things differently.
Thank you, Helen. Good afternoon, Commissioners, and Kimberly. Nice to see you. It's been a while. Yeah, I am Stan Pankin, President of Pearl District Neighborhood Association. And I got involved in this aspect really because of the Navigation Center. So I got a call on I think it was a Monday, from Mark Jolin from Joint Office of Homeless Services. He said, "Hey, Stan, are you coming to the press conference tomorrow?" I said, "I am, but I don't know what it's about." He said, "Well, I just want you to know we're going to put the Navigation Center in the Pearl District." And of course, you all know about the location and all of that. I said, "Oh, really? Well, there wasn't a heck of a lot of outreach to the community about that, but I'll be there." And before I knew it, I was involved, and Helen and I got together, and we said, if this is going to happen, let's help make this be the best possible facility that it can be. So we came together as two communities. I think the big story here is two neighborhoods coming together and working together. To me, that's the big story. What we do in the Pearl, and we have a lot of initiatives that we work on, but we always think in terms of how does it affect other neighborhoods, and how can we set an example and be a model for things that can be done in other neighborhoods across the city. So we don't look at things in a vacuum. And I think our work here on the task force is a great example of not just two neighborhoods working together, but working together with government. So this task force was comprised of many stakeholders, including the mayor's office, county commissioner's office, Deborah Kafuri's office, joint office, police bureau, many, many others, and of course, citizens from the neighborhood. So we did spend over a year, and the initial thrust of the task force was to come up with a good neighbor agreement and help to make the Navigation Center be the best it can possibly be for the center itself, for the people who would be the clients there, and as well as livability for the neighborhood. And I think we did a lot of good work in that regard. So here we are a year later, and we came up with a lot of good ideas. We brought in numerous social agencies. We're part of this task force as well. And after we finished the good neighbor agreement portion, we said, there's more we should be able to do. And under the great leadership, I must say, of Mark Jolin, we said, there's more that we can do. Let's bring the social service agencies together. Let's see if we can come up with a set of ideas that we can help make things better. And I know there are many initiatives across the city on homeless issues and crime issues and so on. And so many of these initiatives wind up, good thoughts, good ideas, they wind up on a shelf somewhere and nothing ever happens. Well, we are determined to make something happen. And thus, we have just started, for now, we're calling our implementation committee. And we just had a meeting this morning, actually. And we had come up with a set of 55 recommendations, which we will be happy to provide to you if you haven't seen it already. And along with those recommendations, we have identified priorities. We've created a matrix looking at the recommendations, some of which are admittedly aspirational, some of which are things that we think are doable in the short term. And we've looked at these recommendations from a low-cost, high-impact basis, high-impact, high-cost, and we want to address them hopefully with the easiest things first, but also identifying who will we work with in government to help us accomplish these goals and these recommendations, whether it be the mayor's office, police bureau, district attorneys, or whatever it might be, agencies, departments, and so on. So that's where we're at right now. We are getting ourselves organized. We're creating a committee that's going to start doing this work, and that's where we're at. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I just want to add two things that we're already taking action on. We have a meeting set up with Chair Kafori's office and Commissioner Myron, just to brief them on this set of recommendations and how they could help us to move it forward. We have a meeting organized to call all the social service providers in the neighborhood to come together next week to have a meeting to talk about how they could help to roll out these recommendations.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time to come in. I think we're just going to move to the next set of public testimony because we have a few other people here and we're way behind schedule. So
Yes,
thank
and
you.
Helen and I have another board meeting to go to.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so the next group is, apologize here, Clark Chen with Shirts and Skins, and Stephen Green with Pencil Old Town, and Jordan Carter with Produce Organics LLC. And I really apologize, but we're way behind schedule.
So Jordan couldn't make it, so it.
Okay. So just sorry about the timing, but we're tight, so thank you.
My name is Clark Chen. I'm a small business owner. I have a basketball apparel company located in Tualatin, but we just opened up a streetwear store with laundry, which is a vintage sportswear shop just in the Tuck Lum building. And the grand opening was this past Saturday, but we've been open for a month.
Yay. Welcome, we're glad to have you.
The official opening was May, I think, 2nd, but then the grand opening was this Saturday. I think you guys have the postcards right there. So we created that just right before the grand opening. I just had my graphic designer put it together because there was, we were sponsoring a basketball tournament called the Rose City Showcase at PCC, Cascade, Lewis and Clark, and the Beaverton Hoop. And there were about 150 youth and high school AAU teams in town, and we wanted to just promote and show them where, you know, this is Chinatown. And so I put that together. We printed about 2,500 cards. It was only $90. And we circulated to all the stores that's listed on that card, and then also gave it out to the tournament organizer just to try to do our part to kind of promote our community here. So, and then just one little step just to kind of, you know, get people to come to the community.
Great, thank you.
Just to say, Clark has been mentoring other entrepreneurs that have also joined him in that building, and you're also subleasing space to someone that's also, he couldn't be here today, but you have another tenant.
So I signed the master lease with Guardian in that space, and then I was interested in the retail operation, but I don't want to run a retail store, so I made a deal with Chris Yen, who's the owner of Laundry, and he had a store over in the Central East Side. He was thinking about moving to the Hawthorne neighborhood. I kind of said, Chris, your audience is here, so come over here. So I'll sign the lease. I'll sublease the space back to you. We'll share the space. He wanted 1,000 square feet. The whole space was 1,500. I would take 500, but he runs the store, so I don't have to be there every day. So it worked out great, and so it's been really complimentary for both of our businesses. And next door to us, like Bernie said, Jordan with and a couple other guys, Wyatt, they're opening up a store called Produce next to us. And these are the same guys that actually work at Compound Gallery just on the corner here. So we're trying to create actually a owners group with like-minded sneakers and streetwear once a month, just trying to get everyone together. And that's probably the biggest challenge, just because everyone has a day job and just trying to carve out a little bit of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. Yeah.
Commissioners, Director Stephen Green. I'm the COO over at Pencil Design Academy. We are one of the 4,000 plus Black-owned businesses here in the city of Portland, and we are the world's only footwear development school and product service. So we work with companies like Nike, Adidas, Coat and Seal, Stone Island, a number of the 1,800 and more footwear brands around the world. One of the things Clark didn't mention is he's a second generation business owner here in Old Town. His family's name is on the gateway when you come into the area, and they had a business here for decades, so he's a native like myself. I've worked here in Old Town in this neighborhood for the past 12 years. 7 of those were working here at Prosper. I think one of the things that I love about the community is that we are really, really close-knit, and I think one of the things I'm excited about is to see folks like Clark come back to the neighborhood, where his family has a long legacy, and the closeness that we have between business owners. Oftentimes, property owners, landlords will reach out to existing business owners and say, hey, do you know anybody that does this or is looking to do this? And because of the relationships that we have, we're able to connect with one another and find ways to bring more people into the family here. I think one of the things that I think to be cautious about and be really mindful of is one of the things Commissioner Kapuya related to was having data and really connecting intentions to outcomes. And so I think as things go forward in Old Town, not only have those really, really great intentions and use great, buzzwords and adjectives, but also connect them to the outcomes, because the old truism of a rising tide lifts all boats is definitively not true. We are in the biggest economic boom in the region's history in the last 19 years, and there's one community where incomes are down, and that's the African American community, where the number of black businesses has more than doubled. One of the reasons why we're here in Old Town is the original hub of the Portland's black community. The original black businesses and neighborhood was just blocks away from here. The oldest black church in Oregon, Mount Olivet Baptist Church, was started just a few blocks away. So it's a wonderful thing being here. We have about 12,000 square feet in the Goldsmith building. We continue to expand, so we're not going anywhere. Thanks for having us.
Great. Thank you very much. All right.
Appreciate it. Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for coming in today, and thank you for the update on the plan. And then we'll be back, I guess, in a month or so, a month or two?
The hope is to come back in August, Chair.
Okay, August. All right, great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll have more questions for you then.
Okay.
So-
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so next up, we're off track, but thank you, Mr. Little, for waiting. We apologize. We had community members, so I had to run through that, but thank you very much. Sure.
Afternoon, Chair Cruz, Commissioners, Executive Director Branham. My name is Kay Little, and I am the Interim Strategic Capital Improvement Consultant at Prosper. I think I'm definitely in the running for the longest title award here. Also to let you know that Tori Campbell is here if you have any questions regarding how this program works along with the Economic Development Agency objectives. I'm pleased to be before you today to talk about a new financing tool that we designed to address a gap within the business finance arena that we saw. So I'm going to share a little bit about the journey that got us here. I'll try to do that as quickly as possible since we're running a little late today, and some of the things that we learned along the way, as well as giving you some highlights about the program. Access to capital is obviously an issue that's faced by a lot of businesses. They really struggle with that. A few years ago, we did a survey that showed that 72% of businesses had a difficulty securing financing. And not surprisingly, when you looked at businesses as far as the time in business, the newer the business, the more those struggles were. For example, businesses that less than 3 years, not surprising, have the most difficulty in securing financing. But even at that 5-year mark, we see 89% of businesses have a difficulty in securing the financing that they need. And so as part of this, we really asked ourselves, kind of what are some of the factors that go into this access to capital issue? And what are some of the factors that contribute to folks not being able to secure the financing that they need? So to start this conversation, we first did a brainstorming session last year and gathered 24 folks. We had some conventional as well as alternative lenders involved, some community members, as well as our technical assistance advisors that we work with through the IBRN network. We posed that question to them. We had a lot of conversations about the gaps that they were seeing in the market. We also took a good look at the cluster industry firms that we try to support to see what types of financing they were most in need of and what issues they were finding in securing that. We also took a close look at our current loan programs that we had to see how they were or were not filling those gaps. And then just took a broader look at a lot of the social investment loan products and whatnot, or social impact loan products and tools that are being used throughout the country and actually internationally. And so what we learned from that is for most of these businesses, working capital and equipment financing were really big needs for them, whether that was your small manufacturers or A&O. They all had this very similar struggles. And then the small businesses we talked to, in addition to needing that money, they had some other hurdles that they had to overcome. For example, maybe not having sufficient collateral to get approved for loans. And of course, that time in business, if you haven't been in business for 3 years, most banks aren't going to even talk to you. So they had some really specialized concerns that we were hoping to address. We also talked to some lenders. We were involved in a lender survey through the Oregon Capital Scan and asking them why they were declining loans. And the biggest reasons were the businesses had insufficient cash flow and there was a lack of collateral. And so those were real issues that kept them from lending. And so what we saw was that a lot of businesses are then forced to rely on their personal savings or friends and family to get the capital that they need. And within that, there are issues. Because as we know, white-owned businesses or white-owned households actually have more net worth than those generally, those non-white households do. And so then that will translate when it comes to starting business and having the funds that you need to really get that business going and to have that working capital that you need to run the business. And so then that early lack of access to capital has a ripple effect as an individual is trying to run their business. We also took a close look at our own lending tools to see how they might be filling that gap or not. We actually have 3 small business loan funds right now that we use. We have some funds that we get from the Economic Development Administration. We have a business development loan fund and a small business loan fund. And all of these are geared to provide working capital and equipment financing. But all of them kind of have some issues with guidelines that sometimes prevent us from being able to fund the loans. So for example, with the EDA loans, they have a requirement that the business will bring 10 to 20% of the project cost or the loan amount to the table. And for a lot of new businesses, that's just not possible. And then we also looked and saw areas in our loan origination process that we maybe needed to focus on to make that process a little easier. But really what we found is that the tools that we have really weren't helping to fill that gap. And so the question was, what can we do to try to address that? And so what we did is we put together what we call the Thriving Small Business Loan Program. This allows us to provide businesses with up to $50,000 of financing. And they can get up to 100% financing, so there's not a requirement to bring 10 to 20% of the money to the table in order to close that transaction. We have flexible collateral requirements. That doesn't mean no collateral, but it means that we're not requiring them to necessarily have real estate collateral, which is one of the conditions of some of the other loan programs, and that kind of tends to be a barrier. There are no minimum time in business requirements. So with that, we still want to see that they're generating income. We want to understand, how they're building their client base, et cetera. But there's no requirement that they have to be in business a certain period of time. Now, in looking at these businesses, often, clearly they're the businesses that pose the greatest risk when it comes to repayment, which is why a lot of banks aren't funding those businesses. So what we did is we included a feature that for businesses that engaged in technical assistance, that they could receive up to 5% reduction in their interest rate. We have put that as a voluntary feature of the loan. But one thing just to kind of bring to your attention is that in all of our loan agreements right now, we do have the ability to require a business to undergo technical assistance if we see that they could use some support in some area of weakness of their business. And so we still have that ability to do that here. But hopefully most businesses would see the benefit of actually going through that technical assistance. And then that would not only help them in the operation of their business to perhaps address some of those areas of weakness, but of course that would also have a positive effect on the repayment risk that we would be facing in working with businesses at this stage. So as you can see, that this program is designed to kind of fit into that early stage of the business where they're using that friends and family money that they have, but it's before they're qualifying for the bank loans, but it's right there to help to maybe accelerate the growth as they're beginning to scale the business. You'll also notice that it includes the Creating Opportunity Loan and the Revenue-Based Financing. So these are two other programs that we're still working on. We're tweaking some of the details around that program regarding some equity-related practices that we're trying to build into that. So we hope to bring that back to you here in a couple of months. So that's kind of the cliffhanger for today's session, just to give you something to look forward to down the road. As far as the strategic plan alignment, this tool is actually put in place to help businesses achieve greater access to capital. So that's for the women-owned, people of color-owned businesses. That's how we're actually helping to reach that goal within the strategic plan. So what we are hoping to do here with this pilot is it's a 2-year pilot. Within that first year, we'll really assess how that technical assistance piece is working, how many businesses are availing themselves of that technical assistance, how many are we having to encourage to go get technical assistance, and then what impact is that having on the businesses and the repayment of the loan amounts. And we'll come back and we'll update the board on how that's going, and we'll make any tweaks that need to be made at that time. And then after that, we'll run it for another year, and then hopefully we'll be coming back to the board to get approval to make that a permanent program. So that's an overview. Do you have any questions for me?
I think it was a great overview, but in the interest of time, I think I'd like to defer our questions for the cliffhanger.
Okay.
And unless anybody has strong feelings otherwise. So I'd love to call for a motion to approve the resolution and the program.
So moved.
Thank you. Have a second? Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. It was a very good overview. And thank you also for the follow-up email that you circulated to us about the technical assistance. That was helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kate.
Okay, we have one more item, and I'd like to almost treat it like a quasi consent item, given our time constraints, because some of us are about to lose our vehicles. So, so this is item number 12.
I have access. I have access.
Yes? What's
I
that?
can get you into the parking garage. You're okay.
Okay, all right.
Promise.
Get us out, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Oh, because you have to get reimbursed.
But no, I've got the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But we have to get the gate, we have to get the thing open inside, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. All right.
Oh, that's good.
I think
Okay,
you'll
so-
make it before 6.
What's that?
I'm a fast talker. Don't worry.
Okay.
You'll make it.
Ready, go.
Chair Cruz, Commissioners, Executive Director Branham, and Justin Douglas, joined by Amy Nagy. You may be having a sense of deja vu on this item. We brought a similar item to you at the May board meeting about requesting an approved amendment to the South Park Blocks Urban Renewal Plan. At that time, last month, we brought the South Park Blocks Amendment as well as the Oregon Convention Center 21st Amendment so that both of those plans could include a public building. As I discussed last month, one of the requirements of state statute is that urban renewal plans, see here I go using the term urban renewal plans as I talked about last month. That's just unfortunately the way that we talk about them. If they do include public buildings, the agency is required to describe how those public buildings meet the goals of the plan. And the South Park Blocks plan, when it was created back in 1985, was created partly to promote downtown as the entertainment and cultural center of the metropolitan area and to establish the South Park Blocks as an art and cultural center in the city and the region. Obviously, the Multnomah County Central Library fits the bill as kind of a culture center for the region. What we did not know at the time last month, though, was that there was an additional public building within the South Park blocks, and that is the city-owned Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall that has some much-needed repairs that we thought that we could partner with the city to invest in. I'll also just quickly note the South Park Blocks District has been in existence since 1985, and that's also 34 years where resources have been coming to Prosper Portland that they have not been going to our sister taxing jurisdictions. So if the board and the city are to approve the ultimate IGAs after the plan amendments to invest resources, we do feel that that is a gesture of good faith to our taxing jurisdiction partners who may not have had some of these resources that otherwise have gone to Prosper Portland over the years. We do have a date at City Council next Wednesday to hear the amendment on both the South Park blocks and the Oregon Convention Center plans. And then we would be coming back to you all later this summer for an agreement with Multnomah County to fund the library improvements, and then what would likely be a tri-party agreement with the city and Metro for the Schnitz. And the reason for that is while the city of Portland owns Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, it's actually managed by Metro. So we likely would bring an agreement to you that expressed the wills of all three parties. As you know, this delivers well on our strategic plan goals. These investments and the improvements will create jobs, and as I mentioned before, we do feel that this is a way to be a good partner with Multnomah County and the city of Portland. I'll turn it over to Amy to briefly talk about the improvements.
Great, thank you. Hello. So this is a great opportunity to partner with some of our other public partners. Most notably, these two institutions actually have been serving the community since the early 1900s, so they are absolutely kind of two significant assets for our downtown area. The first is the Central Library. They use a lot of power. They do it for their heating and ventilating, for their electricity, for their office equipment that serves both the staff as well as the patrons of the library. They have a failing transformer, and that transformer is the one that manages all of that demand. And so as part of this, they would be replacing the transformer as well as the heating and air conditioning unit to make the building more efficient, and also prevent some of the folks who are getting trapped in the elevators currently because of the power failures. So I think they'll appreciate that. The second one is making some safety improvements, and this is really addressing some landscaping and access issues for the U.S. Bank room. And this is a room that's used for both public and library events and gatherings, as well as some library programming. And sometimes they have up to over 100 people in the room. And so as people are exiting, they want to make sure that there's a safety precautions in place there. In addition, there's some visual barriers where people are doing some undesirable activities, so that they would remediate that, as well as put in some water conservation measures with some updated landscaping. So all of this is right now to the tune of about $1.5 million. They are currently going through their bidding process right now, refining their scope. So I think we'll have a closer, more finite number when I see you again in August. The second one is the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, as Justin mentioned. They just finished, actually, the city in partnership with Metro, finished updating the iconic blade sign, the Portland blade sign that you see here. The sign right below it, the marquee, actually needs to be upgraded as well. So it is having some electrical issues, it's seismic issues, as well as just some cosmetic issues. So they would be addressing that, and I will kind of, in the interest of time, spare you on the technical details, but those are the broad strokes of what they would be addressing. Right now, that is estimated to be a project cost of about $1,800,000. So Metro is managing that, as we mentioned. They are right now refining that scope and then looking to go into permitting. So both entities have mentioned that they could meet the requirements around these funds, both from what the expenditures could be made on, as well as the timing for the funds. So they're both very much looking forward to this. I think Prosper's, at this point, we are looking to make a total investment in these projects of about $3 million. Oh, and one really important item is that our business workforce equity, as well as our green building policies, will apply to both projects. If one of the entities has a more stringent policy, then we would defer to that. So, but at a minimum, it would be Prosper's policies.
So one of the things that we heard from you in May was an interest in us doing a little bit more community outreach. So over the last month, Amy has reached out, and she's going to describe not only the outreach that she's done on the South Park blocks, but we also just wanted to highlight the outreach that we've done with stakeholders in the Oregon Convention Center. Even though that plan amendment isn't here today, Amy has reached out to some of those stakeholders.
So thanks, Justin. For the South Park blocks, I went ahead and sat down with the folks over at the Downtown Neighborhood Association, their Land Use and Transportation Committee. They are kind of reinvigorating that committee, and so welcomed any updates that they from city and other public partners. I also sat down with the Portland Business Alliance, their Central City Committee. It's a standing committee they have where they address issues of safety, aesthetics, and things like that to support downtown. Both entities were super excited about the projects as well as our investment in those projects and the involvement, and so I committed to keeping them updated as both of those projects are underway. And then in terms of for the OCC updates and that amendment, I am a board member on both the Go Lloyd board, which is that area's Transportation Management Association, as well as the Lloyd Eco District. And so those are kind of two great gathering spots because they have members that are building owners and business owners. They also have resident members. And so we've been bringing them along as the 100 Multnomah project has progressed, particularly as we're looking at what the various ownership and tenanting options would be. And so I had a chance to just kind of let them know about the plan amendment as well, and everybody was supportive.
Great.
So apologies for speaking so quickly, but hopefully that was a...
Perfect. Thank you. Any quick questions? No? All right. Someone like to make a motion to approve resolution number 7316? Thank you. Second. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good causes there, I think. Money well spent.
Are we
All right.
Because you would relieve some anxiety if we knew.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
what?
Can you really get us?
Yeah, I can get you in.
Yeah.